He had to kill Feng Lingling and his entire clan to maintain the dignity and reputation of Deyu's imperial clan. King Baishan angrily pointed out that Feng Lingling had provoked the celestial lords of the celestial court for no reason, and when he realized he had provoked the wrong person, he put the blame on himself in order to escape responsibility. If this matter was not dealt with seriously and Feng Lingling was not taught a harsh lesson, he, King Baishan, would seek justice from Feng Lingling even at the cost of his life. Both King Baishan and Feng Lingling only had one side of the story. So, who should he believe? Especially when the matter involved the celestial lords of the celestial court, would the celestial court take advantage of it if it was not handled well? Yumu told Wu Qi that the case was currently being debated in the imperial court of Deyu. It had been going on for months, but there was still no conclusion. Yu clan had a very strong backing in the Directorate of Celestials of Deyu, so they were not worried about the final outcome of the matter. Whether Feng Lingling continued to rule Zhong province, or some other lucky fellow obtained the power, Yu clan's status would not be shaken, and the people of Yu clan would not be punished. But, judging from the current rumors in the imperial court, Feng Lingling was very likely to be in deep trouble. Once Feng Lingling was in deep trouble, Feng clan would face a purge from top to bottom. All the officials and clans in the 300 provinces under the jurisdiction of Zhong province would be purged with blood, and replaced by the direct descendants of the new prefecture overseer. Such a thing had happened more than once in the history of Deyu, and the official clans of Deyu had a deep understanding of such a cruel purge. If Feng Lingling was really purged, no doubt Feng clan would be in deep trouble, but Zhu Linggong, who had just been appointed as the county governor of Anli City and the lord of Anhe City, would also be knocked down to the ground. Yumu hinted to Wu Qi that only when Wu Qi became his ally could he protect Wu Qi. In return, Wu Qi would naturally support Yumu with his military force. Both of them would support each other and move forward together. After all, as a member of Yu clan, Yumu also had the ambition to climb up the ranks. The higher the status of a member of Yu clan, the more profound mystic techniques and talismans they could obtain, the better supplies they could get, and the stronger beast souls they could fuse with. The reason why Yumu chose Wu Qi as his ally was that Wu Qi was born in the wilderness, and had nothing to do with the official clans in Zhong province. At the same time, Wu Qi had shown excellent aptitude and charisma. A man like him was destined to have a good future in the military court. Yumu was a smart man, so he approached Wu Qi and made a formal request to form an alliance. Since I have nothing to lose, why shouldn't I agree to his request? Wu Qi smiled. Just now in the Directorate of Celestials, he had promised Wu Qi that as long as Yumu could protect him in the storm that might break out in the future, he would do his best to help Yumu attain a higher status and greater benefits. In the same way, Yumu would use all his strength to pave a golden path for Wu Qi's advancement. It was nothing more than an exchange of benefits. Yumu was very experienced in doing such things, but he never dreamed that Wu Qi was 100 times more experienced than him. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi suddenly turned around and walked out of Anhe City, striding toward a vast mountain range in the distance. As he ran, Wu Qi quickly spread his divine sense in all directions, cautiously checking the surroundings. Meanwhile, the 6 celestial fiend puppets spread out in all directions, guarding the passage behind Wu Qi, not allowing any eyesore to pass through. The ground under his feet trembled slightly as Wu Qi's divine sense captured the fluctuation of an energy vein. The purple energy in his body quickly fused with the fluctuation, and with a blink of his body, he was teleported to the depths of a distant mountain range along the energy vein. He did not make any sound or stir up any energy fluctuation when he teleported. It was the Kwafu chasing the sun's step, a divine ability unique to the experts of the human race. After taking a few turns in the depths of the mountain range, Wu Qi suddenly plunged into a cliff. The cliff shook and rippled like water. Wu Qi plunged into the cliff, and in front of him was a valley that was shrouded in green pines and wisterias, making it very difficult to see from the sky. On top of that, it was also shrouded in formations, making it even more secluded. The valley was about 100 miles long, and its widest part was only about 1 mile long. The terrain was winding, with streams murmuring in the valley, and a 9-turn waterfall pouring down from one end of the valley. There were also 2 energy veins that converged at the bottom of the valley. The place was rich in water vapor and natural energy, and as a result, the valley was full of exotic flowers and plants. As soon as Wu Qi stepped into the valley, he smelled a refreshing aroma swirling around him. It was indeed a good place to live in seclusion and cultivate. As soon as he stepped into the valley, a figure suddenly rushed out from a corner. A flaming mirror soared into the sky, and a large sheet of flame silently burned down toward Wu Qi's head. The faint blue flame came with a strange heat that could penetrate through one's internal organs, as if the blood essence in one's body would be triggered by it and turn into a clump of flame that could burn one to ashes. The three ultimate heavenly flame of burning essence was a vicious flame that could restrain immortal cultivators, a flame that could burn one's essence, energy, and soul. Wu Qi smiled faintly. With a shake of his hand, he sprayed out a plume of cold air, which spread out and transformed into a large sheet of Xian Bing shield that blocked the attack of the flame. Then, his body twisted and his face twisted, transforming into the appearance of Taoist greed. Supremacy 3 Flame, Wu Qi cried out in a deep voice, "It has been years since we last met. Why did you attack me with such a powerful attack?" The figure was none other than Supremacy 3 Flame, who was clad in a red Taoist robe, bearing his fangs and brandishing his claws. He was harvesting a peculiar crop called Blood Valley nearby, and was planning to use it as a raw material for brewing fine wine. Suddenly, he saw a stranger barging into his field, and immediately struck out with a murderous strike. But, when he saw Wu Qi transform into the familiar Taoist greed, he hastily retracted the three ultimate heavenly flame of burning essence, rushed forward and threw his arms around Wu Qi. "Ha ha ha! My good brother! Damn it, it has been a few years since we last met, but what exactly are you up to?" Supremacy 3 Flame roared with laughter as he held Wu Qi in his arms, then gave Wu Qi a few punches. Supremacy 3 Flame was indeed confused by Wu Qi. Initially, he had established Euphoria Heavenly Palace in Anhui City, and had taken control of the entire Anhui County. What a great foundation it was! Not even 2 years had passed since Supremacy 3 Flame became the old great emperor of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Then, Feng Lingling arrived with an army, and a fight broke out between the army of Zhong Province and the Immortals of Green City. Inexplicably, Euphoria Heavenly Palace fell apart, and the official force of Deyu regained control of Anhui County. After that, Wu Qi's celestial fiend puppet brought Supremacy 3 Flame and the others to hide in this deep valley. Over the past few months, not even a shadow was seen. Supremacy 3 Flame was a man who liked bustling places, and he had been bored to death in this valley. But, the celestial fiend puppet had told him that Wu Qi would be back very soon. That was why Supremacy 3 Flame had been suppressing his temper and staying here for so long. Looking at Supremacy 3 Flame's happy face, Wu Qi could not help but feel excited. Supremacy 3 Flame is a good friend. Gladly holding Supremacy 3 Flame's hand, Wu Qi told Supremacy 3 Flame about what happened in Miaoying Palace, and what he had been doing over the past 2 years. He especially told Supremacy 3 Flame that the purpose of his visit this time was to develop his own power in Anhui County. Because Wu Qi already had a very reliable ally in Anhui County, he did not have to worry about any obstruction from the official force of Deyu. Wu Qi was planning to build an enormous power with Anhui County as the foundation. Supremacy 3 Flame danced with joy as he listened to Wu Qi's story. Just as he was about to ask Wu Qi about his specific plan, Eugene hurried out from the deep valley with Beiji. Upon seeing Wu Qi, Eugene could not help but fall to his knees excitedly and say, "Senior, you're finally back." Beiji, on the other hand, dropped to his knees obediently and kowtowed respectfully to Wu Qi. "Your disciple offers greetings, Master. It has been a few years since we last met, and your cultivation base has become stronger." Wu Qi gave Beiji a faint kick. "How do you know that my cultivation base has become stronger? Are you trying to flatter me?" While greeting Eugene and Beiji, Shui Mei, who had grown into a girl, rushed out riding on a sword beam. When she saw Wu Qi, she could not help but let out a loud cry of joy and rushed happily before Wu Qi. After that, a group of young boys and girls rushed out of the valley. They were selected by Euphoria Heavenly Palace to be offered to Qingqing sect for the opening ceremony. These were the children with excellent aptitudes carefully selected from Anlu County, and they were also brought here by the celestial fiend puppets. Seeing that more and more people were coming, Wu Qi could not help but stamp his feet. Fine, let's settle this matter today. Looking at the crowd, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, I intend to establish the underhand sect here today. There is no time like the present, so let's settle this matter today." Chapter 547. Under the dim light, the grassland was filled with people. Putting aside these in-name disciples, trustworthy disciples like Beiji and Xue Mei, who had a great affinity with Wu Qi, could receive the supreme scripture Wu Qi taught them, the Song of Gale. It was a divine ability that could lead them straight to the realm of primordial immortal. Whether they could succeed in cultivating it would depend on their own perception and affinity. Loyalty and obedience are the only requirements I have for all of you. Be loyal and obey me, and I'll give you, a group of pitiful ants, the chance to become stronger, the chance to live eternally, the chance to stand above all living beings, and the chance to be worshipped by all living beings. If you don't kill, others will kill you. If you don't rob, others will rob you. In this cruel world, only violence and power, together with endless plots and schemes, only the fiercest and most venomous snake could survive in this dark forest. Wu Qi gave Supremacy 3 Flame a look, whose face was covered with tears. He cleared his throat and said coolly, "Ninth tier primordial immortal. Any higher, and we'll have to figure it out ourselves. The name of our sect is the Underhand Sect." Then, Wu Qi cried out, "The first elder of our sect, Supremacy 3 Flame." Wu Qi looked at the youthful faces and uneasy gazes of the youths, but his heart was as clear as water. He felt no pressure, no guilt, no uneasiness, and no moral guilt. Their companions, and possibly even their brothers and sisters, had been turned into ashes by Wu Qi's scheme. But, Wu Qi was no longer the Wu Qi of the past. After leaving the mountainous area, Wu Qi took a step forward and soared into the sky, heading straight for Zhongning City. With a wave of his right hand, a large piece of jade shot out. Countless heaven-splitting sword beams shot out from Wu Qi's fingertip, instantly carving the white jade into a huge jade stele. The stele was 30 feet tall, with a cloud vault at the top, and 9 dragons hovering in the clouds at the bottom. A wisp of golden light shot out from his fingertip, and the words Underhand Sect appeared on the front of the jade tablet. Behind the jade monolith, at the top of the jade monolith, appeared 3 lines of small characters: Founder Daoist Greed Tan Lang, Second-Generation Patriarch Lu Xiaobai, and Second-Generation Patriarch Wu Qi. Wu Qi nodded. A wisp of golden light shot out of his fingertip and left behind a row of words on the back of the jade stele: Supremacy 3 Flame, the second-generation elder of Dharma. After that, Wu Qi did not ask for anyone's opinion anymore. He quickly left 2 lines of words on the back of the jade tablet: third-generation sect leader's eldest disciple Zhu Beiji, and second-generation general affairs elder Eugene. Supremacy 3 Flame gave Wu Qi a deep look. Suddenly, he burst out laughing and said, "This is a marvelous technique. Also, the sect rules that you set up are very much to my liking. As long as I am loyal and obedient, I can even commit all sorts of evil deeds." Staring at Supremacy 3 Flame, Wu Qi said with a smile, "Underhand Sect is not a righteous sect to begin with. As long as you have the strength, you can choose to be a Buddha, an immortal, or a fiend. Anything you choose will be a pity." Smiling, Wu Qi gave Supremacy 3 Flame a look and shook his head. Then, he turned to Xue Mei, who was growing more and more beautiful, and said, "Well, since that is the case, Xue Mei, you will be my second disciple." A wisp of golden light shot out from his fingertip and left behind another row of words on the back of the jade tablet: Xue Mei, the second-generation sect leader. Nodding slowly, Wu Qi pointed at the boys and girls and said in a deep voice, "You ants live under the heavenly Tao. Although you are born according to the heavenly Tao and enjoy the great fortune of the heaven and earth, you are ignorant and have no idea what the will of the heaven and earth is. You are powerless, unable to break free from the shackles of the heavenly Tao. You will be born, grow old, fall sick, and die. You will be reincarnated for all eternity. You will suffer endless suffering, but you have no way to struggle. If you have the strength, you can plunder everything you want. With a thud, 600 boys and girls dropped to their knees one after another. They prostrated themselves on the ground and dared not to raise their heads to look at Wu Qi again. Supremacy 3 Flame rose to his feet, patting Shui Mei, who was standing right next to him. Sect leader, he said with a loud laugh, Shui Mei will only suffer hardships if she follows me. Why don't you just take her as your disciple as well? Supremacy 3 Flame's eyes were filled with hope. He had seen all the miraculous abilities of Wu Qi, and he had a vague feeling that if Shui Mei could follow Wu Qi, her future would be limitless. When they reached the Jin Dan realm, Wu Qi would be able to let his disciples cultivate according to their hobbies. Those who were willing to walk the path of Fiend Dao would cultivate the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture or the Celestial Fiend Battle the Heaven scripture which he obtained from the Celestial Fiend puppets. As for the others, they would cultivate the various mystic arts found in the Dark Yin Water scripture. Together with the Tao of Ghost and Deity, the Tao of Primordial Runes, the Tao of Fiend Formation of Miao Ying Palace, and the various pill incantation, formation, and talisman techniques Wu Qi mastered, the various divine abilities and mystic arts of Underhand sect were more than enough to make all the great sects in the world of Immortal jealous. On the contrary, if Shui Mei were to follow him, he would not even have the chance to find some female cultivators to bond with. That would be a burden to him. Not only was it not a righteous sect, it was also a sect in the martial world that required the government to send undercover agents. It was basically a criminal gang. Wu Qi had already deeply understood the true face of the world of immortal cultivators. Therefore, he would never build a righteous sect. What he needed was a powerful sect, and that was all. As long as the sect was loyal to him and obeyed him, he would not care if the sect committed all sorts of crimes. Eugene and Beiji dropped to their knees and kowtowed to the jade tablet just like Supremacy 3 Flame did. With a stern gaze, Wu Qi glanced at the boys and girls who knelt on the ground and dared not to raise their heads. With a nod, he said, "Tell me your names one by one. All of you are now the in-name disciples of Underhand sect. I will teach you the Tao scripture of unity of inaction as the foundation of our sect. If you can cultivate to the Jin Dan realm with this cultivation technique, there will be other supreme mystic arts for you to cultivate." Since he had built the Underhand sect, there was still a hidden danger that he had to solve as soon as possible. Suddenly, Supremacy 3 Flame felt that befriending Wu Qi was the best decision he had ever made in his life. The Song of Gale was a marvelous cultivation technique that was completely different from all the other cultivation techniques Supremacy 3 Flame had ever created. He roughly guessed that it was a mystic art that could lead one straight to the realm of Gold Immortal. Immediately, Wu Qi copied all the rules of the Underhand sect on Earth, forcibly applying the rules of a sect in the martial world to a sect of immortal cultivators. After that, Wu Qi taught the foundation technique of the Tao scripture of unity of inaction to the 600 boys and girls. After that, he brought Supremacy 3 Flame and the others into the depths of the valley, teaching each of them a part of the Song of Gale. Eugene, Shui Mei, and Beiji could not find any benefits from the Song of Gale, but when Supremacy 3 Flame heard that Wu Qi was teaching him a mystic art of cultivation, his eyes went wide instantly. He grabbed Wu Qi's arm, tears streaming down his cheeks as he said, "Is this a mystic art that can help one cultivate to the realm of Gold Immortal? Brother, you are indeed a good brother. If I want you to live, you will live. If I want you to die, you will die. If I want you to cry, you will cry. If I want you to laugh, you will laugh. If I want you to kill your dearest brother, your dearest lover, draw your weapon and chop off his head. Wu Qi. I don't care what the human race should do, I don't care what the great Tao of heaven and earth dictates to the human race. I'll give you a chance to transcend the heavenly Tao, a chance to get rid of the fate of old age, sickness, and death, a chance to live a free and unfettered life. I don't care if you are a man or a woman, beautiful or ugly, kind or evil, I don't care about these things. I don't care if you commit murder and arson in the future, I don't care if you bully men and rape women, I don't care if you go on a rampage and bring disaster to the world in the future. I don't care about these things, and I won't care about you." All of a sudden, Wu Qi realized that he was really busy, very busy. Even though he had a precious treasure like the star jade spirit gold, he did not even have the time to craft a suitable weapon. But there was nothing he could do about it. Who asked him to be so busy? My sect's ancestral master's real name is Tan Lang, and my nickname is Greed. I am the second ancestral master of the Underhand sect, the current sect leader. The dreadful pressure made all the boys and girls bow their heads, their bodies drenched in sweat. Not only these boys and girls, even Supremacy 3 Flame and the other three were staring at Wu Qi in astonishment, puzzled as to why he possessed such a dreadful power and a bizarre aura. Supremacy 3 Flame fell to the ground with his back facing the sky. Wu Qi laughed, flicked his sleeve, and told the others to keep an eye on the sect. After that, he left the valley in a hurry. In the nameless valley, on a grassland about 1 acre in circumference. The sky could not be seen, as the vines hanging on the thick trunks of the pine trees, which had been growing for an unknown number of years, had completely covered the sky. The valley was illuminated by the dim light emitted by dozens of fluorite stones and pearls. The Unity in Action Tao scripture paid the most attention to establishing a good foundation. The true essence cultivated would be pure, and unbiased. It had the charm of Taoism's tolerance of nature. Using it as a foundation cultivation technique was the most suitable. Wu Qi was standing on the stone platform, which was constructed using a spell, looking down at all the people. With both hands clasped behind his back, he unleashed the dreadful power in his body without scruple. True Body of Heaven and Earth Scripture, Dragon Transformation Script, Song of Gale, Dark Een Water Scripture, Inferno Hell Fiend Scripture, Unity Tao Scripture, even the Magnetic Force Grand Magic, Primordial Runes, Tao of Ghost and Deity, and many other divine abilities and mystic techniques. All sorts of auras, either vigorous, mysterious, pure and indifferent, or domineering and mighty, were spreading out from his body without any disguise. Thousands of boys and girls had turned into ashes in Greenwood Mountain because of Wu Qi and Su Qin's plan. I'll give you the strength, the chance to change your destiny, and all I want is your loyalty. Unreservedly, completely, 100%, without the slightest bit of discount, completely and utterly loyal. Apart from loyalty, there's also obedience. It's also unreserved, complete, 100%, complete obedience. Staring deeply at Supremacy 3 Flame, Wu Qi asked in a deep voice, "Fellow Taoist, brother, can you lend me a hand?" After getting Wu Qi's answer, Supremacy 3 Flame burst into laughter, then solemnly kowtowed to the jade steel. Supremacy 3 Flame, Xue Mei, Eugene, and Beiji were the people Wu Qi was familiar with, and they were also the people Wu Qi could trust. Behind them were 600 boys and girls from Qiqi, all of whom had impeccable talent and background. Thousands of boys and girls were carefully selected from Anlu County and offered to Green City. After the great battle in Greenwood Mountain, only 600 of them survived and were brought to this valley. As long as you have the strength, you can do whatever you want. Chapter 548. After laying the foundation of the Underhand sect on Panga continent in this nameless valley, Wu Qi suddenly recalled the information he was told by the people of Luo clan when he was in Mi province. There was a copy of the Panga's map in the prefecture overseer's mansion, which could tell if there were any immortal cultivators through the changes in the underground energy veins. In order to establish the Underhand sect, he would need a vast foundation to provide a great amount of immortal stones, energy stones, and various spirit herbs to train his disciples. In order to do so, he would need to excavate energy stone veins and collect various spirit herbs. Wu Qi even planned to find a blessed land, connect all the underground energy veins together, and forcibly build an immortal mansion. Any big move would be exposed in the copy of the Panga's map in the prefecture overseer's mansion, and he might be violently suppressed by the officials of Diyu. In order to avoid this danger, Wu Qi had to rush to Zhongning City and solve this threat. But, as to what he should do, Wu Qi could only wait until he arrived at Zhongning City, and then think of other ways. Just like 3 months ago, Zhongning City was still heavily guarded. The number of flying ships wheeling and patrolling in the sky had even increased by a few times. A new military camp had been built in the east, south, west, and north of Zhongning City, each garrisoned with tens of thousands of formidable human warriors. The streets of Zhongning City were shrouded in a gloomy fog. Pedestrians were walking in a hurry, their faces filled with panic and fear. At the sight of this, Wu Qi had a vague feeling that Feng Lingling was in a bad situation. Faced with the double pressure of Patriarch Miao Ying, the Nine Celestial Lord, conferred by the Celestial Court, and King Baishan of Deyu Dynasty, Feng Lingling, a first-grade middle marquis of Deyu Dynasty and the prefecture overseer of Zhong Province, seemed to be losing his footing. The army outside the city and the flying ships above him should be the army Feng Lingling had mobilized. But, Wu Qi doubted if Feng Lingling had the courage to fight against Deyu Dynasty. Heavens above, the Deyu Dynasty had countless first-rank provinces. Perhaps other than the Emperor of Deyu, no one really knew how powerful Deyu was. However, could a mere first-grade province withstand the storm unleashed by the Deyu Dynasty? Maybe this guy is just putting on a show. Hurrying along the street, Wu Qi made his own judgment. Perhaps, Feng Lingling was really putting up a desperate fight just to negotiate with Deyu Dynasty? Wu Qi could not help but cry out in his mind once again, "Oh heaven, is Feng Lingling out of his mind? Negotiating terms with the Deyu Dynasty? Was he trying to force the human emperor to take action personally?" However, this had nothing to do with Wu Qi. Although Feng Lingling was set up by Wu Qi and ended up in this situation, Wu Qi had no sympathy for him at all. Wu Qi had an old grudge against Feng Lingling's precious son, Feng Jupan. So, how could he have the mood to sympathize with Feng Lingling? Zhongning City was filled with the aura of an impending storm, and Wu Qi could not help but think of Su Qin. It had been 3 months since he returned to Anhui City, and Su Qin was nowhere to be found. According to Yan Bugue, Su Qin had gone out for a stroll, and was checking on the situation of the elites of the scouting office. Zhongning City was in a state of chaos now, and this old mister was not going to intervene in it. The strange atmosphere in the city that was filled with a faint smell of blood startled Ao Buzan, who had been hiding in Wu Qi's clothes and absorbing the energy of the flaming tiger. Slowly, he poked one eye out from Wu Qi's clothes, glanced around, and said with a firm tone, "I can smell a lot of dead people. Many of them will be killed. TSK, this girl has a pair of long legs." Just as he said those words with a serious expression, Ao Buzan suddenly saw a female captain clad in a soft armor walking hastily by the roadside. Saliva immediately trickled down from the corner of his mouth. His eyes stared straight at the female general's swaying and slender body, and his eyes immediately turned red. Reaching out, he pressed down on Ao Buzan's head and shoved him back into his clothes. Then, Wu Qi said earnestly, "Work hard in your cultivation. You can see it, but you can't eat it. Aren't you torturing yourself?" Ao Buzan's gloomy roar echoed out from his clothes, and in just a blink of an eye, he had lost all signs of life. Sure enough, this fellow had devoted all his attention to absorbing the enormous energy of the flaming tiger. Walking along the street and approaching the prefecture overseer mansion, Wu Qi saw that the teleportation formation in front of the mansion was filled with fully armored warriors. With a cursory glance, he found that there were at least 5,000 formidable warriors surrounding the teleportation formation. A few captains clad in golden armors stood next to the formation, and the aura emanating from them made Wu Qi hold his breath. They were definitely gold immortals. After losing the Enchanting Skull's flag and other immortal items that specialized in attacking one's nascent soul, Wu Qi did not have a handy weapon. He dared not fight these captains who were strong enough to fight gold immortals. Carefully glancing at the few captains from the corner of his eyes, Wu Qi hurriedly turned into a small alley on the side of the road. With just a glance, Wu Qi found something very strange. The oracles of the Directorate of Celestials, who hovered above the mansion and formed a defensive formation with the flying ships, were nowhere to be seen. Apart from the 200 large flying ships cruising above the mansion, not a single oracle was seen. Without the help of the oracles, the defense of the prefecture overseer mansion was riddled with holes. Wu Qi scanned the mansion with his chaotic divine eyes, and found that there were gaps everywhere that he could easily sneak into. After pondering for a brief moment, Wuqi recalled what Yumu had told him, and came to the conclusion that Yumu, the Grand Oracle of the Directorate of Celestials in Zhong Province, had abruptly renounced his support for Feng Lingling. It was very likely that Yumu had reached an agreement with someone in power in the Yu clan, betraying Feng Lingling in exchange for the protection of the rights and interests of Yumu and his clan in Zhong Province. Feng Lingling, it looks like you're in a very bad situation. Wuqi thought gloatingly, and was pleasantly surprised to find that a chaotic and unstable Zhong Province was more beneficial to the development of the underhand sect. Therefore, he decided to let Feng Lingling suffer. The more turbulent Zhong Province became, the more convenient it would be for the underhand sect. After quickly considering the benefits that Feng Lingling's downfall might bring him, Wuqi smiled pleasantly. With a twist of his body, he transformed into a clump of yellow earthen mist and fused with the ground. Then, he quickly plunged into the prefecture overseer mansion, and began to wander around under the mansion with ease. Complicated restrictive formations had been set up under the prefecture overseer's mansion, but the formations used by humans were very different from those used by immortal cultivators. The formations of the human race could only function under the control of powerful oracles at all times, unlike the formations used by immortal cultivators, which could absorb natural energies at any time and continue to function. When Yumu had removed all the oracles from the Directorate of Celestials, there were only 2 or 3 formations left under the mansion. Obviously, they were derived from immortal formations, and the others had long stopped working. With a sigh, Wuqi easily penetrated the dilapidated defensive system under the mansion and entered the core of the mansion. A large number of soldiers were patrolling the mansion, especially near a magnificent hall built around a garden. Nearly 10,000 soldiers had surrounded the hall, and from time to time, officials in long robes and tall crowns, as well as generals in full armors, were seen walking in and out of the hall with complicated expressions on their faces. From time to time, the cries of women and children could be heard coming from one of the halls in the middle of the mansion. The mansion was on the verge of collapse, and it was a scene of doomsday. Wuqi could not help but shake his head. Neither Wuqi nor Su Qin, the mastermind behind all this, had expected that Feng Lingling would end up in such a state. At most, he thought that Feng Lingling would be killed in the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean. He did not expect that he would escape and return, and that he would bring the entire Zhong province into turmoil. After wandering around for a while, Wuqi found something interesting when his divine will swept across a hall behind the main hall of the mansion. A thought came to Wuqi's mind. This is it. He immediately fled into the hall and appeared in the middle of the hall in a dignified manner. The hall was empty, with not a single person in sight. With his divine will, Wuqi discovered that not only this hall, but even the important halls in the surroundings, where a great amount of gold and jade jewelry, energy stones, immortal stones, and official documents were all unguarded. In the prefecture overseer's mansion, only the few halls near the back garden were heavily guarded by nearly 10,000 soldiers. The other places were practically deserted. Wuqi gave the tightly shut door a glance over his shoulder, smiled, and came before a strange screen at the far end of the hall. At first glance, it was just an ordinary screen made of white jade, measuring 100 feet in length and 30 feet in height. A clean piece of jade was mounted on a bracket made of black volcanic rock. It looked ancient and heavy, and there was nothing special about it. But if one were to look closer, one would notice that wisps of smoke or rays would flash across the screen from time to time, and many images of mountains, rivers, towns, and villages could be seen flashing across them. Countless tiny specks of light were hidden behind the screen, and between them were threads that were tens of thousands of times thinner than a strand of hair. With a thought, Wuqi memorized the distribution of these light specks and threads with his enormous divine will. If he was not mistaken, these light specks were the locations of the various spirit veins in Zhong province. And, these threads were the energy veins that connected the spirit veins between the spirit veins. Wuqi exercised his chaotic divine eyes and glanced around the screen. When he found that there were no defensive mechanisms around the screen, Wuqi smiled delightedly and sent his enormous divine will into the screen. Immediately, he sensed a wisp of faintly discernible intelligence like that of a newborn baby. Sensing the intrusion of Wu Qi's divine will, the intelligence immediately snuck into the depths of the screen. Wu Qi's innate chaotic divine soul followed the wisp of wisdom and rushed into the deepest part of the screen like an invisible ghost, completely unaffected by the various restrictive spells on the other side of the screen. Amidst the boundless clouds and smoke, a small continent was seen hovering above them. It was a small continent with mountains, rivers, and countless villages and towns. When Wu Qi scanned it with his divine will, he immediately found familiar mountains and rivers such as in He City and Enle County. With just a thought in his mind, this small continent could immediately display the topography of Zhong province to him. Is this the core of the copy of Pangu's map of mountains and rivers? Laughing strangely, Wu Qi immediately separated a wisp of his innate chaotic divine soul and smashed it into the core. Suddenly, a large sheet of clouds burst out from the copy of Pangu's map of mountains and rivers. Countless shadows of mountains and rivers flickered, while bolts of lightning struck straight towards Wu Qi. Chapter 549. Hee, are you trying to tickle me? Purple mist rose from his body as Wu Qi forcibly withstood the attack launched by the copy of Pangu's mountain and river map with his body. The power of the electric light was insignificant, roughly equivalent to the full power of a Jean Dan cultivator's thunder palm. It did not even break a hair on Wu Qi's body. The booklet was just a supportive treasure. It wasn't a weapon to be used in battle, so how could it have much offensive power? Be good, don't run, don't run. You are not a living creature, so why are you afraid of death? Wu Qi mumbled to himself. His enormous divine sense blasted into the core of the copy of Pangu's mountain and river map and swallowed the agile intelligence. Countless information instantly surged into Wu Qi's sea of consciousness. It was information about all the spirit veins, spirit caves, and all the mountains and rivers in the entire central province. The information was very detailed, such as the number of 10,000 years old ginsengs and the number of 10,000 years old Ganoderma growing on a particular mountain. All the information was clearly fed back into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. In just a quarter of an hour, thousands of mountains and about 30,000 spirit herbs had lost contact with the spirit veins. It could be concluded that there were cultivators active on these several thousand mountain peaks. Moreover, on one of the mountain peaks, there were more than 7,000 spirit herbs being picked at the same time. There was definitely a sizable immortal sect here, and they were currently collecting spirit herbs on a large scale. On the huge jade screen, a red light flickered lightly. Wu Qi compared it to the location of the screen mountain. It was the place where he sensed more than 7,000 spirit herbs were picked at the same time. If the central province was not in such a chaotic state, the central province's army would have already rushed to that mountain to investigate the situation. But now that the central province was in chaos, no one was on duty in this hall, and no one paid any attention to the feedback from the screen mountain. Wonderful. So that's how it is. This copy of Pangu's mountain and river map is actually connected to the entire central continent's earth vein. Wherever the earth vein covers, nothing can be hidden from this place. Wu Qi sighed and said, fortunately, I got this information from the Luo clan. Otherwise, when the underhand sect grows stronger, they will need to gather a great amount of spirit herbs and mobilize a great amount of energy from underground energy veins. That will attract the attention of the officials of Zhong province. A strand of his pre-world chaos divine soul replaced the consciousness of the copy of Pangu's map and controlled the core of this jade screen. Every movement of this copy was under Wu Qi's control. All the information was within his grasp. From now on, as long as it was within the realm of Zhongzhou, any actions of the underhand sect would not be discovered by the Zhongzhou government through this booklet. Wu Qi gave the huge jade screen a glance, memorizing some of the information in it. Where were the best spirit veins, where were the best cave residences, where were the best spirit herbs, where were the best spirit stone veins, and all kinds of other metal veins. All the data that was useful to the underhand sect was picked out by him. Right next to Enle County, under the jurisdiction of an county, there was a nameless mountain, where there was a huge immortal grade energy vein, which was naturally formed into an immortal mansion. On top of that, The nearby area was rich in natural resources, enough for a large immortal sect to live and work in peace. Without hesitation, Wuqi chose this mountain as the future base of the Underhand sect. As for Enle County, it was a base that he planned to control with the identity of a human. He could not put all his eggs in one basket, so it would be better for the Underhand sect not to build its base in Enle County. After a careful examination of the surroundings and making sure that he had not left any traces behind, Wuqi happily left the Great Hall and went to a few important storerooms in the mansion. According to the rule of Great Yu Dynasty, every first-grade province had to pay tribute to the capital city once every 10 years. During the 10 years, the most valuable part of the tributes collected by the prefecture overseers would be stored in the treasury of the prefecture overseer mansion. With a cheerful smile on his face, Wuqi entered the storeroom on the west side of the mansion. The number of immortal stones and energy stones consumed by the Yu Dynasty every year was astronomical. Whether it was the bone talismans and formations of the Directorate of Celestials, the teleportation formations in various places, or even the war machines such as flying ships, they all consumed a great deal of immortal stones and energy stones. Therefore, immortal stones and energy stones accounted for a large part of the tributes that the Yu Dynasty sent to the capital every year. The storeroom of immortal stones was hidden deep underground, measuring more than 10 miles in both width and length. It was only when he arrived here that Wuqi realized what it meant to be piled up like a mountain. A great number of immortal stones and energy stones were piled up neatly in this place. For the future development of the Underhand sect, the various formations and diagrams in the sect would consume a great amount of immortal stones and energy stones. A killing formation that covered an entire mountainous area would cost tens of thousands of immortal stones, and the supporting energy stones would cost millions of energy stones. If the Underhand sect were to mine such a huge amount of immortal stones and energy stones, it would take a lot of manpower and time. But here, a small mountain of immortal stones and energy stones were waiting for Wuqi. After laughing loudly, Wuqi cast a restrictive spell and flicked his sleeve. A stream of light shot out, and countless immortal stones and energy stones flew whistling into his sleeve and were hidden in the interstitial space he had temporarily created. Interstitial space was a unique trick of heaven immortals. However, to create an interstitial space in his sleeve and store such a huge amount of immortal stones and energy stones, it would consume Wuqi's energy continuously. Helplessly, Wuqi touched the poor-quality storage ring on his finger, which only had the space of 3 rooms. He began to miss the black dragon spirit ring that had a large storage space. He sighed and gave the empty storehouse of immortal stones a look. Then, he went into the storehouse of ores next door and looted the huge amount of metal ores stored in Zhong province. After that, he went to the spirit herb storeroom, the pill storeroom, and some other storerooms. One of them was specially used to store the bones of the spirit beasts that were used to craft bone talismans. Pale white skeletons were piled up together. There were at least 100,000 spirit beast skeletons piled up together. As there was a technique in the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture that could craft magical items with the bones of spirit beasts, Wuqi naturally would not let them go. Therefore, he packed them up and took them away as well. Apart from these strange storerooms, there was also a blood bank under the mansion, which stored the blood essence extracted from countless demon beasts and spirit beasts and preserved with a mystic technique. The blood essence was also the best material used by the great oracles of the human race to refine magical treasures and craft talismans. Vats after vats of beast blood were piled up together, filling the entire blood bank with a frightening smell of blood. After pondering for a while, Wuqi realized that the blood of these spirit beasts and demon beasts could also be used to craft talismans of the Fiend League. Without hesitation, he emptied the blood bank as well. After a round of looting, Wuqi emptied the several dozens of storerooms under the mansion. The interstitial space he created temporarily in his sleeve had already expanded to 100 miles in circumference, and the energy consumption had made him feel a little strenuous. He snorted sulkily and took another round around the mansion. When he found that there was nothing left for him to take advantage of, Wuqi sneaked out of the ground and came to the street outside the mansion. He flicked his sleeves, which had become heavy, and hurriedly ran out of the city. The existence of this interstitial space was completely dependent on his magic power. Now, the power in his body was constantly decreasing. If there was no treasure to stabilize the void in this interstitial space, the continuous consumption of magic power would make even a gold immortal cry. Wu Qi was in a hurry to go to an county and open up a cave abode in the mountain he had his eyes on just now, so that he could store all the treasures he had looted from the mansion today. Gnashing his teeth, Wu Qi made up his mind to find a way to get his hands on an immortal storage magical treasure first. Too inconvenient, really too inconvenient. However, an immortal storage magical treasure required several rare materials with spatial properties. As Wu Qi could not gather so many treasures in a short period of time, he could only sigh helplessly. Holding the heavy sleeves, Wu Qi had just arrived at the city gate of Zhongning City when he suddenly heard the blaring of horns throughout the city. The shrill sound towered into the sky, and the city gate before him slowly closed, trapping Wu Qi in the city. Wu Qi looked up in surprise and saw a great sheet of white light shooting out of the pagodas in the four corners of Zhongning City, transforming into a thick light barrier that enveloped the entire city. A sonorous voice echoed through the entire city, "Assemble the army and prepare for war. Those who retreat will have their entire clan executed." Wu Qi's heart skipped a beat. He could not be so unlucky, could he? Could it be that someone was going to attack Feng Lingling? Damn it! Why did they come at this time? Looking at the tightly shut city gate, Wu Qi felt like weeping but had no tears. If he had left earlier, he would be out of the city by now. Now that all the defensive mechanisms in the city had been activated, did he have to fight his way out by force? The interstitial space in his sleeve was still consuming Wu Qi's energy. Once a fight broke out, Wu Qi could not guarantee that he would have enough energy to protect the interstitial space in his sleeve. Once the energy supply ran out, the interstitial space would explode, and everything in it would turn into nothingness. Those were the treasures that the entire Zhong province had accumulated over the past few years. It was more than enough for the underhand sect, which now had 600 members, to develop for thousands of years. While he was hesitating, a group of heavy-armored warriors came running toward him. One of the captains, who was holding a two-handed sword, forcefully pushed Wu Qi aside with his shoulder. "If you don't want to die, step aside and get lost," he cried out with a sonorous voice. Wu Qi moved his finger. Just as he was about to kill the captains, blinding beams of light suddenly burst out from all four directions of Zhongning City, about 100 miles away from the city. They towered several tens of miles into the sky, so anyone standing in Zhongning City would be able to see the flickering flames clearly. The ground trembled slightly, and muffled rumbles echoed out from all directions like the rumbling of thunder. It was a uniform noise, as if some giants were carrying a huge mountain and slamming it onto the ground. Wu Qi was taken aback. Without hesitation, he sprung up and stood on top of a stone pillar that stood several hundred feet tall beside him, casting his gaze over the city wall and looking into the distance. Outside Zhongning City, clouds of smoke and dust were rising into the sky. 4 armies were marching out from the blinding light, surrounding the entire Zhongning City. Staring at the 4 armies in the distance, Wu Qi could not help but suck in a cold breath. Chapter 550. In Zhongning City, the prefecture overseer of Deyuzhong province. From the east, 1,000 longbow men clad in heavy stone armors, each standing 1,000 feet tall, were marching neatly toward Zhongning City. Their skin was dark green, and from their faces to their necks, chests to their abdomens, and thighs to their ankles, their bodies were densely covered with complicated runes. Their several feet thick stone armors were emitting a faint green gleam, and countless runes were carved on their smooth and polished surfaces. Green airwaves visible to naked eyes were swirling around these longbow men, emanating an enormous aura that made one's heart palpitate. These longbow men were the culprits that caused the ground of Zhongning City to tremble. Not to mention their height and weight, just the stone armors they wore alone weighed at least several 100,000 kilograms. With every step they took, they covered a distance of over 100 feet. Every step they took left deep footprints on the ground, and countless tiny cracks could be seen on the ground around them. Behind these long-bow men were 30,000 elite warriors clad in bronze armors, riding on single-horned dragon riders that looked like raptors. Their left hands were holding the reins, while their right hands were holding a 60 feet long spear with a peculiar shape. They were following closely behind these long-bow men. Wu Qi gave these men a glance with his divine will. Each of them had an overall strength not weaker than a heaven immortal, and the elite soldiers behind them each had an overall strength that could match a nascent divinity cultivator. From the west, 300 flood dragons were dragging 100 heavy bronze chariots, whistling as they charged toward Wu Qi. Each chariot had 6 wheels, was 30 feet wide and 100 feet long, and had 2 floors. The first floor was packed with heavily armored soldiers armed with powerful crossbows, while the second floor was packed with soldiers clad in light, soft leather armors and armed with sharp blades, ready to attack the city. Behind the 100 bronze chariots were a large number of slow-moving siege weapons, including tall ladders, huge mobile watchtowers, and ancient war machines such as battering rams and battering rams. Among them, the most eye-catching were 3 tall celestial fiend puppets carved out of obsidian. Each of them stood 2,000 feet tall, emanating a dazzling light as they walked slowly toward the city wall, driven by the runes embedded in them. Wu Qi glanced at the city wall of Zhongning City, wondering if it could withstand a single punch from these 3 obsidian celestial fiend puppets. Through his chaotic divine eyes, he discovered an energy core inside the puppet, which was as hot as lava and emitting a bright light like a small sun. Judging from the terrifying power emitted by the energy cores, it was clear that the 3 stars in the sky had been shot down, and after a powerful compression, they were embedded in the bodies of these puppets as power sources. Just the power of these 3 energy cores was comparable to that of an 18th tier gold immortal. It was not hard to imagine the destructive power of these puppets. In the north, there were 60,000 feathermen flying in the sky. Their wings connected with each other, turning into a dark cloud that covered the sky and swept over. The feathermen were flying at a height of 100 miles above the ground, holding exquisite longbows in their hands and carrying huge quivers on their backs. Each of them carried at least 300 arrows on their back. When the arrows were shot down from a height of 100 miles above the ground, regardless of the initial kinetic energy of the arrows, the height of 100 miles was enough for these alloy arrows to easily pierce through a tens of feet thick stone wall. Ordinary cultivators would not be able to withstand the impact of a random arrow. Below these winged men, there were 20,000 different kinds of people. There were 3-eyed people, 2-faced people, 1-armed people, 1-legged people, and strange people with a big hole in their chest. There were only 20,000 people, but there were almost 1,000 different kinds of people among them. What surprised Wu Qi the most was that there were a few carriages among them, each of which had a few large crystal water troughs, in which lay a few beautiful mermaids and mermen with curvaceous bodies and beautiful faces. Only heaven knew how these mermaids fought while soaking in the water troughs, but they had managed to come here. One of the mermaids was sobbing, tears rolling down his face and falling into the water trough, turning into thumb-sized pearls. More than half of the water troughs of these mermen were taken up by the pearls formed from these tears. Shaking his head, Wu Qi looked south. The south looked like a regular army. 3 chariots pulled by true dragons were slowly marching toward Zhongning City with 50,000 soldiers lined up in a formation. The 50,000 soldiers marched in a strict formation, looking mighty and emanating a faint murderous aura. While marching, the 50,000 soldiers did not panic at all. They steadily maintained the formation that was emanating a murderous aura, and none of them made a wrong move. Above the 50,000 soldiers, 3 dragon-shaped flying ships were gliding along with the formation. Near the ships were nearly 10,000 oracles of the Directorate of Celestials hovering in midair. Their bodies were surrounded by flashing lightning bolts, surging flames, rolling waves, and puffing clouds. Some oracles even had thick black smoke rising from their bodies from time to time, with a couple of ghost claws poking out of it. As these oracles moved together, just the ripples of energy emanating from them had caused the weather to change. Large patches of dark clouds followed them as they advanced, pressing down on Zhongning City. In front of the formation, 3 chariots pulled by true dragons made Wu Qi's pupils constrict abruptly. They were pulled by true dragons, not the flood dragons used by the 100 chariots in the west. The chariot in the middle was pulled by 6 yellow dragons, the chariot on the left was pulled by 6 green dragons, and the chariot on the right was pulled by 6 white dragons. The 18 dragons had shrunk their bodies to about 300 feet, and the aura emanating from them made Wuqi's skin tighten. Every one of these dragons had a cultivation base close to that of a high-tier heaven immortal. Ao Buzan poked his head out of Wuqi's clothes lazily. He stared blankly at the dragons for a while, then suddenly shook his head and sighed. Damn it! Each generation is worse than the last. Is it worth it to work like a slave for the human emperor just for some stinky money and some virtues brought by the imperial decree? Ao Buzan reached out his right hand and counted for a while, then sighed and said, "Forget it, I'm not going to greet your parents anymore." TSK, yellow dragons, green dragons, and white dragons, Lao Tzu had old lovers in those days, and a few of them were impregnated by Lao Tzu. Perhaps, you are Lao Tzu's sons. It's risky to scold you. Wuqi looked down at Ao Buzan and asked, I can understand it for the money, but for the virtues brought by the imperial decree? What's the use of that? TSK, Ao Buzan lazily picked his teeth with his claws. Casting a mocking glance at Wuqi, Ao Buzan chuckled and said, as for the use of virtues, you can treat it as a fart, but it smells very good. Unfortunately, this fart smelled very fragrant. Therefore, those Buddhas, immortals, mountain spirits, and water monsters all wanted to have more of this fart smell. Ha! Flicking hard on Ao Buzan's head, Wuqi frowned and asked, what's the use of virtues? After pondering for a moment, Ao Buzan spread his front claws and said indifferently, those with virtues, especially those who are related to the human race, can weaken the power of the heavenly tribulation, and even avoid it when they transcend the heavenly tribulation. As for those gold immortals and primordial immortals, the heavenly tribulation they have to face every time they ascend a tier. TSK, Tisk. After sighing with emotion, Ao Buzan shook his head and said, the power is too great. A long, long time ago, when Lao Tzu was still a virgin dragon, I followed Lao Tzu's son, Lao Tzu, to watch a second-tier primordial immortal transcend his tribulation. Once a second-tier primordial immortal transcends the tribulation, he would be given the title of Great Emperor in the Celestial Court. What a pity, the first thunder tribulation of a second-tier primordial immortal had smashed him and the 3 primordial immortal artifacts he had prepared. Ao Buzan sneered and said, so, virtues are very attractive to those gold immortals and primordial immortals. The higher their cultivation base is, the more they will value it. The virtues of the human race could help immortals weaken or even resist the power of the heavenly tribulation. Wuqi nodded thoughtfully. It was a good thing, but it was useless to him. As an innate chaotic spirit body had escaped the surveillance of the heavenly Tao, as long as he did not do anything that would attract the attention of the heavenly Tao, it would be very difficult for the heavenly tribulation to find him. But, since Ao Buzan's father had brought him to watch the tribulation of a second-tier primordial immortal transcend, he must have an extraordinary background. Wuqi gave Ao Buzan a glance, who was slowly turning his head back. He was thinking that he would have to interrogate this fellow one day and find out his background. While they were talking, the 3 chariots were approaching Zhongning City. Outside the south gate of Zhongning City, tens of thousands of soldiers had marched out and formed into a formation, ready to fight head-on. As a light shout echoed through the area of 100 miles in circumference, the 50,000 soldiers behind the 3 chariots stopped altogether, and only the 18 heavenly dragons continued to pull the chariots forward. Before long, the chariots were less than 1,000 feet away from the army outside the south gate. The bead curtains hanging from the chariots parted to the left and right, revealing the people inside the chariots, which even Wuqi could not see through with his chaotic divine eyes. Upon seeing those people in the coach, Wuqi nearly burst out laughing. In the chariot on the left was Lao Ai, clad in a robe embroidered with an embroidered python. Goddess Miao Xian was sitting on his lap, while Miao Yu and Miao Feng were sitting on his left and right, feeding him fine wine. In the chariot on the right, King Zhangqiu was sitting on the throne with a gloomy face, while Lord Longyang was sitting beside him with his hands clasped before his chest, his face full of smiles. It seemed like both of them were sitting on the same level. In the middle chariot, an old man clad in a long black robe, a foot-long black jade crown on his head, jade pendants and jade rings dangling from his waist, and a black jade glove on his left index finger, middle finger, and ring finger of his left hand. He was emanating an eerie aura, sitting side by side with an immortal official of the celestial court, who was clad in a starry crown and a splendid robe. Both of them were smiling and chatting merrily. The bead curtains were lifted, and the old man and the immortal official exchanged pleasantries. After that, the old man rose to his feet slowly with a black scroll in his hand, took a few steps forward and came next to the shaft of the chariot. He cried out loudly, "Feng Lingling, the prefecture overseer of Zhong province, His Majesty's decree is for you to dismiss the army at once, open the city gate, and surrender. For the sake of your many years of hard work, His Majesty will spare the lives of your clan members. If you refuse to repent and put up a stubborn resistance, don't blame the army for attacking the city and burning your entire clan to the ground." Wu Qi nodded silently. This was an ultimatum, and it seemed that the debate between the Yu dynasty and Feng Lingling had come to an end. Suddenly, Feng Lingling's furious roar echoed out from within the city. What crime did this marquis commit? Chapter 551. Like a wounded beast that had fallen into a trap, Feng Lingling's roar was filled with a sense of desolation and despair. His sonorous yet hoarse voice towered into the sky like a whirlwind brought up by a great rock, causing a strong gust of wind to surge around Zhongning City, and dust to spread out in all directions like a gray iron curtain. The old man smiled faintly. With the imperial decree in his hand, he cried out in a deep voice, "Who are you to judge whether you are guilty or not? Feng Lingling, bow your head and admit your guilt, and you may still have a chance to live. If you resist stubbornly, don't blame the army for being merciless and wiping out the entire Zhongning city." Wu Qi was shocked. Wiping out the entire Zhongning city. If you want to kill Feng Lingling and his clan, I will not have any objection. But, if I wipe out the entire Zhongning city, won't I be trapped in it as well? Frowning, Wu Qi's body abruptly transformed into a clump of dark mist, and he was about to drill into the ground. But, a burst of white light flickered on top of the pagodas around Zhongning City, and a tremendous counterforce bounced Wu Qi up from the ground, causing him a severe pain all over his body, and nearly breaking his bones into pieces. He glanced around furiously. Zhongning City had activated its strategic defensive mechanism, and even the escape art found in the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture could not escape from it. With a twist of his body and mind, Wu Qi transformed into a gust of wind and fled into the sky. But, a sheet of white light sprinkled down from the sky, and numerous runes could be vaguely seen flickering in the air. Once again, Wu Qi slammed headfirst into an iron wall. His body twitched violently as he was bounced back. Countless stars were blinking before his eyes, and he nearly fainted. The defensive mechanism of Zhongning City was extraordinarily strong and ridiculously well defended. Even without the oracles from the Directorate of Celestials, it still exerted a power that left Wu Qi helpless. After all, it was the capital of a first-grade province, and the defensive mechanism of Zhongning City represented the highest level of all the defensive mechanisms and formations of the Yu dynasty. Its defensive strength was only slightly weaker than that of the capital city of the Yu dynasty. Even Wu Qi could only sigh helplessly at the sight of such a tight and meticulous defensive restriction. Although he was exercising an innate escape art, he was still bounced back by the enormous restrictive force in the void. The person who designed this defensive mechanism must be a top figure in the Yu's Directorate of Celestials, and most likely, he was an existence whose strength was comparable to that of a primordial immortal. Only someone like that could restrict the innate chaotic energy. Wu Qi gave the surroundings an annoyed look, then frowned. Stealthily, he transformed into a dark shadow and plunged into the shadow of one of the battlements. Feng Lingling's voice towered into the sky, "I have an army of several 100,000 soldiers under my command. How dare you act recklessly?" The elderly man, who was holding the edict, chuckled. Shaking his head, he abruptly leaped up and floated in the air, about a mile high from the ground. he unfurled the imperial edict in his hand. Instantly, tens of thousands of streams of yellow light and purple mist burst out of the edict, transforming into 9 golden dragons that flew out of the edict, circling around the old man at high speed. I am Fu Sangyi, the Marquis of Ming, the left imperial edict of De Yu's Directorate of Imperial Edict. By the human emperor's order, I've come here with an army to suppress the rebels, cried the old man sternly. He took a deep breath, then cried out sternly, how can any man of De Yu betray the enemy? As soon as the edict was lit, the ground around Zhongning City began to tremble, and faint dragon roars could be heard echoing out from under the ground. Countless soldiers in the 4 military camps of Zhongning City cried out at the same time. One after another, they turned their weapons and aimed them at Zhongning City. Wu Qi sensed a dreadful aura emanating from the edict, one that made one tremble with fear and have no choice but to drop to one's knees and worship it. Under the control of the aura, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers from Zhong province had no power to resist. No matter how loyal they were to Feng Lingling, they turned their weapons and pointed their spears at Feng Lingling, at the general who commanded the army in the camp. A few generals who were loyal to Feng Lingling roared furiously, swinging their weapons and hacking at the soldiers who had defected before the battle. However, before their weapons could fall to the ground, Fu Sangyi had already cried out, "How dare you rebel? How dare you commit such a treacherous act? Surrender now, and you can save your family, your parents, and your wives. But, if you persist in following the wrong path, the only thing that awaits you is death." Immediately, a 1-foot-long golden dragon emerged under the weapon of each of the generals. Auspicious lights were shooting out of the dragons' mouths, blocking the attacks of the generals. Wu Qi sensed that these dragons were the manifestation of the dreadful and mighty aura contained in the edict, and the aura came from the golden characters of birds and insects on the edict. Every stroke and stroke of these characters felt as if a mighty emperor was roaring at the top of his voice, and the aura that flowed out from them had subdued these generals in an instant. If this edict was personally written by the current human emperor, De Yu, then the overall strength of human emperor De Yu was simply too frightening, as he was able to subdue the generals of Gold Immortal Realm with just the aura contained in the characters. If this edict was not personally written by the human emperor, but by those ministers who drafted it in the imperial court, then the human emperor who could control these ministers would be even more frightening. Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath and shook his head. His mind was filled with thoughts as he tried to figure out a way to get out of this awkward and dangerous situation. Using his chaotic divine eyes, he glanced around and found that the void was filled with white light screens that were invisible to the naked eye. Huge and complicated white runes could be seen everywhere. These runes combined with the light screens and covered the entire Zhongning City, forming into a massive strategic defensive mechanism of Zhongning City. Very quickly, his chaotic divine eyes found the core of these runes and light screens. The Directorate of Celestials, the Punishment Court, and the Military Court were the energy sources of these runes and light screens. Meanwhile, the Prefecture Overseer's Mansion, which was surrounded by the 3 great palaces, was the core of all the energy sources and the control center. All the changes of the defensive mechanism were controlled in the depths of the mansion. Wu Qi could not help but feel regretful. If he had known that the core of the strategic defensive mechanism of Zhongning City was also under the Prefecture Overseer's Mansion, he would have destroyed the energy control core when he looted those storehouses. Unfortunately, he was too preoccupied with looting the treasures at that time, and did not discover that there was such a secret place under those storehouses. Some extraordinary treasure had concealed the aura of the entire strategic defensive mechanism of Zhongning City, and neither Wu Qi's divine will nor chaotic divine eyes could discover its existence. If not for the fact that the defensive mechanism had been activated and all the energy had begun to erupt, Wu Qi would not have discovered that the core was also under the Prefecture Overseer's Mansion. Frowning in distress, Wu Qi looked helplessly at Fu Sangyi, who was laughing complacently outside the city. With a shake of the edict in his hand, a sheet of golden light and purple mist swept out. Those generals who were resisting stubbornly were sucked into the edict before they could even let out a grunt. Fu Sangyi laughed as he rolled up the edict, opened his palm, and struck it with a grayish-white thunderbolt. When he unfolded the edict again, a large sheet of black ash rushed out of it, and the generals who were sucked into it had turned into a pile of ash that drifted away in the wind. What a domineering edict! What a domineering power! Wu Qi clearly noticed that those generals who were sucked into the edict did not put up any resistance. They did not even have the thought of resisting before they were sucked into the golden light and purple mist. Like wooden statues made of clay, these generals had been awed by the aura of the human emperor unleashed from the edict, and had lost the desire and courage to resist. Wu Qi clenched his jaws tightly as he stared at the imperial edict, trying to figure out its secret. He could not figure out why the edict could possess such a frightening power, and how it could kill all these captains so easily. However, no matter it was his divine will, his chaotic divine eyes, or even his chaotic energy, when he was still about 100 feet away from Fu Sangyi, an invisible strong light had blocked Wu Qi's vision. Not only had it blocked Wu Qi's vision, but even his divine will and chaotic divine eyes had also suffered the counterforce of the power. He felt a slight pain in his divine will, and his eyes felt sore as if they were being pricked by countless needles. 2 lines of tears rolled down from the corners of his eyes, and for a moment, he could not even see clearly what was a few feet away from him. Wu Qi was horrified. He quickly retracted his divine will and vision, then turned to look at Fu Sangyi in astonishment. What was this power? How could it resist the chaotic energy? The power was strange, yet familiar at the same time. Wu Qi had once sensed it when he was in the chariot of 8 horses. Could this be the legendary power of the human emperor? Was it the legendary faith of the people, which was worshipped by all the people? Outside the city, the armies of 4 directions had formed an encirclement. The hundreds of thousands of soldiers who were originally under Feng Lingling's command had changed their target. Under the command of several hundred generals brought by Fu Sangyi, these soldiers had joined the armies of 4 directions, surrounding the entire Zhongning city tightly. A murderous aura towered into the sky, while a strong wind blew across the army, turning the once scorching hot wind into a piercing cold. The cold wind wheezed around Zhongning city. Even though it was separated by a thick defensive formation, Wu Qi could still feel it drilling into his body through his pores, making his internal organs shiver. Staring at the armies of 4 directions, Wu Qi could not help but grind his teeth. He knew that even if his cultivation base was 100 times stronger, it would still be impossible for him to fight his way out from the encirclement. The armies of 4 directions, together with the imperial edict in Fu Sangye's hand, were more than enough to trap and kill several dozens of gold immortals with ease. In the world of cultivators, numbers did not necessarily mean strength. A gold immortal could easily kill countless heaven immortals. But for the human warriors of Diyu, as long as they had enough talismans and formations, their overall strength was more than enough to trap and kill gold immortals, or even existences of a higher realm. Wu Qi gnashed his teeth as he stared at the armies of 4 directions. Were these fellows really going to slaughter Zhongning city? Even as his heart was burning with anxiety, Lao Ai slowly rose to his feet with Goddess Miao Xian in his arms. Looking up at Fu Sangyi hovering in the sky, he said coolly, "Your Excellency, there is no need to talk nonsense with them. Why don't we just attack the city? We will slaughter all the men, and all the beautiful girls will belong to Miaoying Palace. That is our compensation. As for the gold and silver, we will divide them according to our agreement." Goddess Miao Xian cried out in a sweet voice, "Isn't that right? We have prepared such a grand formation, and it will be a waste of our energy if we do not fight them to the death. Let's attack the city now. If Feng Lingling really surrenders, it will be so boring." Fu Sangye's face turned serious as he turned to look at the immortal officer of the Celestial Court. Obviously, Goddess Miao Xian was the leader of the immortal officers of the Celestial Court. He looked at her with a smile, but did not say a word. Fu Sangye's face darkened as he raised the imperial edict and was about to issue the order to attack the city with blood. But right at this moment, Lord Longyang rose to his feet and called out slowly, "Wait, Feng Lingling. Wait. Feng Lingling, you still have a way out. The last way out." Chapter 552. It was the only way out. Not only did Feng Lingling stop his clamor, even Wu Qi had focused all his attention. The only way out was to avoid the possibility of war and the loss of lives. Of course, it also prevented Wu Qi from fighting the army outside the city. Wu Qi was not interested in getting involved in the muddy water of an army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Suddenly, a dead silence reigned both inside and outside Zhongning City, with only a few sudden cries of babies coming from inside the city. Without any warning, the few houses where the cries of babies could be heard suddenly crumbled to pieces, and all the people inside, including the babies, were crushed into mud and blood. Only then did Feng Lingling's voice come from afar, "Hee, the only way out." Feng Lingling has been running amok all his life, and this is the first time someone has said such a thing to me. Lord Longyang sighed softly. He flicked his sleeve and stamped his foot, then said in a soft voice, "Since Prefecture Overseer of Zhong Province is unwilling to listen to my good words, then let's go to war. I can also take this opportunity to see how much combat strength Prefecture Overseer of Zhong Province still has after the Human Emperor's edict has taken control of all the soldiers in the 4 camps outside the city." Sitting on the throne, King Zhangqiu said in a cold voice, "Forget about the soldiers in the 4 camps, the Directorate of Celestials has already fallen out with Prefecture Overseer of Zhong Province, and their Grand Oracle, Yu Mu, is already one of us. Without the support of the Directorate of Celestials, how long can the defensive formation of Zhongning City last?" Wu Qi's ears pricked up, and Feng Lingling's voice immediately rang out, "What is the way out? Tell me." Lord Longyang smiled charmingly and said softly, "I suppose Marquis of Zhong already knows the reason behind this. We don't care about the mistakes and losses, as long as I submit to your highness and serve your highness wholeheartedly in the future. What happened today is still in the past, and can be discussed." Sighing softly, Lord Longyang smiled softly and said, "According to Lord Lao Wang, Marquis of Zhong Province, Feng Lingling is a capable minister. Otherwise, how could he occupy the high position of Marquis of Zhong Province? Although he is a little arrogant and does not know the rules of a minister, his ability and talent are all there. Wouldn't it be a pity if such a capable minister were to die? Lord Fusangyi, do you agree?" With the imperial edict in his hand, Fusangyi, who was controlling an army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and preparing to attack the city, looked at Duke of Longyang with a solemn expression. After a long silence, he shook his head and said, "Mr. Longyang, what you said just now, was it King Baishan's intention?" Lord Longyang looked at Fusangyi in astonishment. After pondering for a while, he bowed to Fusangyi and said, "How could this be the idea of our Lord Lao Wang?" However, when Lord Lao Wang told us about what happened, he mentioned Feng Lingling. Longyang felt pity for his talent and the difficulty in cultivating his cultivation base, so he wanted to spare his life. Lord Longyang chuckled and said in a soft voice, "Do you think that our master Lao Wang is the kind of man who tolerates rebellious people and protects those who harbor evil intentions? What kind of person does Lord Fu Sang think our Lord Lao Wang is? Is this not something that our Lord Lao Wang can do, say, or even think about?" Fusangyi turned to look at King Zhangqiu with a stern expression. "What do you think, King Zhangqiu? What you said just now?" King Zhangqiu did not say a word. He just looked at Lord Longyang and nodded. Lord Longyang sighed softly. Staring at Fusangyi, he said with a smile, "Why are you so calculative, Lord Fu Sang? Feng Lingling is a capable minister, and I don't want to kill his entire clan just like that. If he can leave the city and surrender, it will prove that he still has some repentance in his heart." Fusangyi said immediately, "Even if he does leave the city and surrender, he will be captured alive and brought to his majesty." Lord Longyang spread his arms and said, "Have you forgotten something, Lord Fu Sang? Before His Majesty issued the imperial edict and ordered us to lead the army to besiege the city, he only told us to deal with it as we see fit. Feng Lingling is just a mere marquis of first order. Do you really want to capture him alive and bring him back to His Majesty?" Fusangyi smiled and shook his head. He gave Lord Longyang's peerlessly handsome face a glance, then sighed softly and said, "What you said does make some sense. It is rare that both your highnesses are not going to hold Feng Lingling accountable for his offense. Therefore, he should be handed over to both your highnesses. Lord Longyang said immediately, it is the young prince who cherishes talents. Our Lord Lao Wang will never take a liking to a mere Feng Lingling. In just a few words, countless blades, spears, swords, and halberds were hidden in the words of Lord Longyang and Fu Sangyi. Fu Sangyi gave Lord Longyang a deep look. His facial muscles twitched, and he did not say a word for a long while. Lord Longyang smiled indifferently. Staring at Zhongning City, he cried out sternly, Feng Lingling, don't make a mistake. You might not care about your own life, but don't you care about your family and children as well? After a full 15 minutes, Feng Lingling's old and tired voice was heard. Fu Sangyi, did His Majesty mention in the imperial edict, how would His Majesty punish me if I were to open the door and surrender? Was it a reprimand? Demotion? Banishment? Confinement? Or some other means? I have 175 sons and grandsons, and 97 daughters and granddaughters. I don't even need to mention my wives and concubines. What will they do? Fu Sangyi remained silent for a long while, and then he said slowly, His Majesty always has a tolerant and benevolent heart. Feng Lingling laughed fiercely and said, how can I open the door and surrender with such empty words? When I open the city gate, all of you will be at the mercy of me. Lord Longyang chuckled. Even as he was about to say something, Lao Ai had already cried out impatiently, Feng Lingling, why are you talking so much nonsense? You can either open the city gate and let them do whatever they want to you, or you can just fight us. I'm very interested in your daughter, your granddaughter, and even your wives and concubines, as well as your mother. Goddess Miao Xian twisted her body and giggled. She pinched Lao Ai's muscular waist, which did not have any extra fat, and cried out in a coquettish voice, you little rascal, I'm still here. How dare you have the heart to touch another woman? Lao Ai roared with laughter. In front of the crowd, he rubbed Goddess Miao Xian's curvaceous body with all his might, nearly turning her into a naked sheep in just a few strokes. Lao Ai let out a strange laugh and said, what? Didn't you feel very happy when I played with those female disciples of Miaoing Palace in front of you? Goddess Miao Xian giggled, while Lao Ai stuck out his lower abdomen and laughed wildly. Miao Feng and Miao Yu, who were standing off to the side, giggled with laughter. Even the immortal official of the celestial court inside the chariot frowned and turned his head away as he could not stand it anymore. From a distance, Wu Qi even saw the immortal official's lips move slightly. Although he did not make any sound, he had indeed cursed under his breath, shameless fiend immortal. Shaking his head, Wu Qi glanced to the left and right, trying to come up with all kinds of ideas in his mind. Break out of the formation. The defensive formation of Zhongning City was simply too powerful. With Wu Qi's current overall strength, there was no way he could break through it. Wait for the result quietly in the city. But, he had to be careful that he would be caught in the crossfire once the city was breached by the army outside. Although Lao Ai and Lord Longyang seemed to be Wu Qi's allies and partners, Lao Ai had Miaoing Palace as his backer, and Lord Longyang had King Zhangqiu, the blockhead. But, Lao Ai had Miaoing Palace as his backer, and Duke of Longyang had King Zhangqiu, the blockhead. If both of them were to have some other thoughts, they could easily besiege and annihilate him with an army. Who could he complain to? While Wu Qi was pondering over all kinds of ideas, Feng Lingling cried out sternly, don't you dare humiliate me, you knave. Fu Sangyi, do you really think that you can conquer Zhongning City? Lord Longyang and Lao Ai shook their heads at the same time and sighed. Lord Longyang lowered his voice and said to King Zhangqiu with a sigh, this old fellow is determined to revolt. It is a pity that he has all his abilities. King Zhangqiu's face darkened. After a long while, he cried out in a low voice, old fool, I'll rape all his wives and children, and kill all his clan members. Meanwhile, Lao Ai murmured to Goddess Miao Xian with a regretful tone, TSK, once the city is breached, according to the decree of the human emperor, this Feng Lingling will be dead for sure. What a pity for the girls in his clan, I was planning to dote on them. Goddess Miao Xian just smiled and did not say anything. Her eyes were filled with lustful ripples, which made her look very alluring. Lao Ai was tempted. He straightened his lower body abruptly and rushed into the chariot with Goddess Miao Xian in his arms. Miao Feng and Miao Yu hastily put down the curtains of the chariot, then rushed to the cloud bed and joined the battle. The corner of Fusang Ye's mouth curved up into a very strange smile. He waved his hand lightly and cried out in a low voice, "Attack the city!" Hee hee. Ha! The 10,000 feet tall longbow men clad in heavy rock armors roared at the same time. They raised both arms up into the sky, and an enormous energy burst out from their palms. Abruptly, the energy condensed in the sky and transformed into a mountain that stood 100 miles tall, with a base that covered the entire Zhongning city. A muffled rumble echoed out as the enormous mountain fell straight down from the sky, smashing straight towards Zhongning city. The people of Longbow Kingdom roared excitedly, while the Feathermen and some other strange humans let out sharp and sonorous cries at the same time. The mountain plunged abruptly from the sky thousands of miles above the ground like a shooting star. At a speed that was thousands of times faster than a shooting star, it smashed brutally onto the defensive formation of Zhongning city like a beam of light that streaked across the sky. A faint cracking noise was heard. In Wu Qi's chaotic divine eyes, he saw that one of the three most critical energy cores in the defensive formation of Zhongning city, the one located in the Directorate of Celestials, had suddenly disappeared without a trace. After that, a dark light screen enveloped the entire Directorate of Celestials. With one of the three energy cores gone, the defensive mechanism of Zhongning city crumbled instantly. The lofty mountain in the sky pressed down gently, and a frightening astral wind came whistling down. 80% of the buildings in Zhongning city were instantly shattered into pieces. Broken rocks flew in all directions, smashing the brains of countless citizens and killing them with broken bones and tendons. Feng Lingling's furious howl was heard coming from the distance. "You Zong, you son of a bitch. How can you call yourself my in-law?" The gigantic mountain fell heavily on Zhongning city, crushing the entire city under its weight. Yuzong's voice was heard coming leisurely. "Isn't it just a few of your sons and grandsons who married my daughters and granddaughters? It's fine if you don't want to be in-laws. This old man doesn't mind that they are no longer virgins. Return them to me, and this in-law can end here." Feng Lingling was so angry that he howled furiously. The defensive formation of Zhongning city was broken. Chapter 553. As the great mountain came crashing down, the natural energies around Zhongning city were thrown into a complete mess. The energies of 5 elements were mixed together, and vaguely, there was a sign of them fusing into one and turning into chaos. The combined force of 1,000 longbow men of Heaven Immortal Realm was too great to withstand. Wu Qi had his body curled up and was hiding several tens of feet under the ground. His aura was faintly fused with the surrounding natural energies, as he was ready to face the impact. A loud boom rang out, and a tremendous force came crashing down from above. Wu Qi's body trembled, and a series of creaking noises could be heard coming from his bones and muscles. The tremendous force nearly crushed him into a meatball. He coughed out a mouthful of blood in a sorry state, then cursed Fu Sangyi in a low voice, who had given the order to attack the city. Layers upon layers of strange forces rushed crazily towards Wu Qi like a great flood. Wu Qi opened his eyes, and he could clearly see layers upon layers of strong yellow beams coming at him like giant dragons rolling and tumbling in the air. Wherever these yellow beams went, the soil was shattered into the tiniest grains of sand and dust. It was a brutal and overbearing force, as if several hundred giant deities were hammering everything under the ground with thunder hammers in their hands. Cursing furiously, Wu Qi kept moving his palms, unleashing several dozens of primordial runes that transformed into dark beams and condensed into a thick light screen around him that looked like a bronze bell. Then, he waved his palms, unleashing a vast amount of earth energy from under the ground, while a large sheet of acquired magnetic force burst out amidst loud buzzing noises, fusing into the defensive barrier formed from primordial runes around him. At the same time, a great amount of cold air rushed out from the surrounding soil and condensed into a layer of translucent dark-green crystal wall, also fusing with the defensive barrier formed from primordial runes. 3 layers of defensive barrier merged into one, tightly wrapping around Wuqi's body. When the strong yellow beam came crashing onto the barrier, it produced a frightening boom and made Wuqi's body tremble violently. Stars danced before his eyes, and his energy and blood were rocking violently, as if his body would explode at any moment. He laughed bitterly. Seeing that the restrictive spell he had constructed was about to crumble under the impact of the strong yellow light, he twisted his body and transformed into a clump of hazy, dark fiend aura, which spread and spread in all directions. With an earth-shattering boom, the restrictive spell Wuqi had set up shattered. The strong yellow light swept through the demonic aura generated by Wuqi's body in an unstoppable manner, then rushed into the depths of the ground. Countless explosions rang out as they passed through, shattering some of the remaining defensive mechanisms beneath Zhongning City, leaving nothing behind. Covered in blood, Wuqi retracted his devil energy and returned to his original form. He had almost used up all of his energy, and the temporary interstitial space in his sleeve was about to collapse. Furiously, he cursed the longbow men who were attacking the city. His eyes darted back and forth, trying to find a way to tide through the current crisis. Although the defense of Zhongning City had been breached, the rest of the battle had nothing to do with Wuqi, and he would never help Feng Lingling. However, there would be chaos during the battle, and it should not be difficult for him to find an opportunity to steal or rob 1 or 2 storage magical treasures with large storage capacity. With the bad thoughts rumbling in his mind, Wuqi carefully crawled out of the ground, exercised a concealing spell to conceal his body, and carefully came out from the surface. Zhongning City was now a piece of flat land, and the lofty mountain erected by the longbow men had vanished without a trace. However, only the Directorate of Celestials was left standing in the city. Apart from the intact Directorate of Celestials and the tens of thousands of oracles hovering above it, all the buildings in Zhongning City had collapsed, and all the people in the city were dead, without leaving even a trace of their ashes. Under the impact of the strong yellow light, even with Wuqi's cultivation base and his magical divine ability, he was almost severely wounded, let alone those ordinary people. Over 1 million people in Zhongning City were turned into nothingness by the attack, and they did not even have the chance to be transformed into ghosts. Exercising his chaotic divine eyes, Wuqi glanced around. Not only had the strong yellow light destroyed the fleshly bodies of all the people in Zhongning City, it had also shattered their souls that had drifted out of their bodies. The air was filled with soul essence particles, and through Wuqi's chaotic divine eyes, they turned into a dense purple mist that blanketed the entire Zhongning City. With a thought in his mind, Wuqi carefully exercised a mystic art from the scroll of stealing. A stream of light shot out from between his brows, transforming into a whirlpool that kept sucking all the soul essence particles in the surroundings into his body. Nourished by these soul essence particles, his innate chaotic divine soul grew and grew stronger at an incredible speed, becoming heavier and more stable. Before long, a figure that looked exactly like Wuqi, emanating a faint purple golden light, gradually took shape in his spiritual ocean. As long as 30 to 50% of the souls of over 1 million ordinary people were absorbed by Wuqi, it would bring him great benefits. While Wuqi was stealthily seizing the treasures left behind by the dead ordinary people, Fu Sangye's voice rang out once again, "Feng Lingling, are you really going to resist stubbornly and refuse to admit your guilt? Why do you have to be so stubborn? All the people in Zhongning City have been killed by you alone." The prefecture overseer mansion had been reduced to ashes by the great mountain that was attacked by 1,000 longbow men. Only Feng Lingling and several thousand people were left standing on the ruins of the mansion. These people had huge bone talismans hovering above their heads, emanating strong energy waves. It was the protection of these high-grade talismans that allowed the several thousand people around Feng Lingling to survive the attack just now. Apart from Feng Lingling and his company, there were several thousand people standing on the ruins of the military court and punishment court as well. Their bodies were covered in blood, and they were staring menacingly at the oracles hovering above the Directorate of Celestials. The surviving people from Zhong province's punishment court and military court did not have much hatred for the army outside the city. Instead, they hated the oracles from the Directorate of Celestials to the bone. If the Directorate of Celestials had not turned the tables and destroyed one of the energy cores of Zhongning City's defensive formation at the most critical moment, how could Zhongning City have been breached so easily? Yu Mu and the Directorate of Celestials had to be blamed for the destruction of the city and the destruction of their homes. Feng Lingling roared at the top of his voice, "All the people in Zhongning City have been killed by me alone? That's bullshit." Clad in a heavy armor, Feng Lingling took a few steps forward. Waving a coiling dragon steel spear in his hand, he cried out furiously, "What crime have I, Feng Lingling, committed? What crime have I committed? Offending the Celestial Lord of the Celestial Court? Framing Prince Diyu? Is this what I, Feng Lingling, have done? King Zhangqiu, Goddess Miao Xian, do you dare to swear to the heaven that everything I've said is a false accusation against you?" King Zhangqiu did not say a word. His face was still as rigid as a wooden man as he stared coldly at Feng Lingling. Goddess Miao Xian did not have the time to answer Feng Lingling, as she was busy tangling with Lao Ai. The crisp sound of flesh slamming echoed across the entire battlefield, followed by the obscene laughter of Miao Feng and Miao Yu. Amorous passion was burning hot, and the battle in the chariot was going on, so Goddess Miao Xian did not hear what Feng Lingling was cursing. With a complicated look in his eyes, Fu Sangyi stared at Feng Lingling, who was roaring furiously with the spear in his hand. Slowly, he raised the imperial edict in his hand and said coolly, "Since things have come to this, why are you still wasting your breath? Feng Lingling, I'll give you a chance to rally your army and fight to the death. Get ready now, and I'll give you 15 minutes to construct the formation." Feng Lingling stared blankly at Fu Sangyi. After a long while, he finally turned to look at the several thousand clan members and confidants around him, as well as the several thousand men scattered on the walls of the military court and the punishment court. The army he could gather now was merely about 10,000 men. How could he stand a chance of winning against the army of several 100,000 soldiers outside the city? The more people there were, the stronger the power of the human battle formation would be. It was completely different from the battle between the immortals. An army of over 10,000 men, together with bone talismans and battle formations, was definitely no match for a battle formation formed by several 100,000 soldiers. Fu Sangyi had given him a chance to rally his army and fight to the death, but with a battle formation formed by over 10,000 soldiers, he did not even have the chance to fight to the death. With a strange laugh, Feng Lingling turned the spear around and pointed it at his own heart. "I've always been loyal to the human emperor. Even though I do have some selfish motives, I've never disobeyed the imperial edict issued by the human emperor. Every 3 years, I pay a small tribute, and every 10 years, I offer fresh fruits and delicacies, the specialty of Zhong province, according to the seasons. I've never slacked off." Poor Feng Lingling, despite his loyalty, today, his entire clan is going to be executed by someone with a groundless crime. Laughing wildly, Feng Lingling threw his head back and shook his head, then thrust the spear forcefully towards his heart. One after another, Feng Jupan and all the members of Feng clan behind Feng Lingling let out furious roars and dropped to their knees at the same time. Just as the tip of the spear was about to pierce through Feng Lingling's heart, the sky suddenly darkened. Countless dark clouds began to gather crazily in the sky above Zhongning City, transforming into a huge hand that measured several tens of miles in circumference and grabbed down from the sky 100 miles above the ground. Crack! A thunderbolt shot down from the sky and smashed forcefully onto the steel spear held in Feng Lingling's hand. When the tip of the spear was about an inch away from Feng Lingling's heart, it suddenly flickered and vanished into nothingness. Feng Lingling, together with several thousand of his clan members and confidants, as well as his loyal supporters from the punishment court and military court, felt their bodies lightened, and they suddenly floated up into the sky. King Zhangqiu's expression flickered as he cried out sternly, "How dare you? Who dares to rescue a criminal of the human emperor?" With a flip of his palm, a 6 feet long sword, half black and half white, engraved with the sun, moon, and stars, suddenly appeared in King Zhangqiu's hand. Then, he leaped up into the sky and swung the sword towards the huge hand. A strong beam of light, half black and half white, flashed across the void, as if the heaven and earth were suddenly torn in half by the sword. Suddenly, the void behind King Zhangqiu cracked open, from within which came a 1 foot long palm, fair and delicate as if it was carved out of white jade. While Lord Longyang was still uttering the words "Your Highness, be careful," the palm had already gently pressed on King Zhangqiu's heart. A miserable howl rang out as blood sprayed out of King Zhangqiu's 7 apertures, and he was sent flying forward like a cannonball. The sword beam unleashed by him was shattered, exploding into countless specks that drifted in the air. With a gentle gesture, the gigantic hand made of clouds reached out, and Feng Lingling and the others had long disappeared into it. Fu Sangyi hovered in midair and did not make any reaction. His eyes flickered, and a faint smile spread across the corners of his mouth. The immortal official of the celestial court stared blankly at the huge hand. His forehead was covered with cold sweat caused by terror. Which primordial immortal has taken a fancy to Feng Lingling? He murmured under his breath. How could he save his entire family with such a divine ability? He, Patriarch Miao Ying's errand is really troublesome. Which enemy of hers is trying to make things difficult for her? Is the grudge between primordial immortals something that people like us can meddle in? Wu Qi's ears twitched, and he heard the immortal official's murmurs. He gave the huge hand a deep look, which was slowly disappearing into the void. With a sway of his body, he seized the opportunity when the defensive formation of Zhongning City was shattered to noiselessly transform into a gust of wind and drift away. Outside Zhongning City, only several 100,000 soldiers were left standing where they were, unable to make a sound. Chapter 554. When Zhongning City was destroyed, 7 figures were hovering above it, staring curiously at the scene where the army led by Fu Sangyi completely destroyed the city. Green, white, and black gusts of wind were swirling around each of them. 6 of them had vague figures that looked like shadows, and only one of them, an old man with a white beard, had a corporeal body that looked no different from that of an ordinary human. The old man lowered his head to look at Zhongning City. With a mocking sneer on his face, he shook his head and said with a sigh, "The human race is getting worse with each generation." In the ancient times, the human race supported each other and struggled to survive on Pangu continent. The human race was like an iron plate, and even we, the clansmen of the gods, had suffered greatly at the hands of the human race, and were nearly wiped out. Since when did the human race begin to kill each other? He pointed at Feng Lingling, who was roaring furiously on the ruins of the prefecture overseer mansion, and said with a faint sigh, "This prefecture overseer of Zhong province is an expert of gold immortal realm." In the ancient times, such an expert of the human race would only be killed in the war with the alien races. How could his own people attack him? The white-bearded old man, who was shaking his head and sighing, suddenly had his expression flickered. At this very moment, dark clouds began to gather above Zhongning City from all directions. The huge palm pressed down casually, scooped up Feng Lingling and the others, and brought them away. King Zhangqiu wielded his sword and attacked the huge palm, trying to stop Feng Lingling and his companions. But, he was severely wounded and coughed blood by the palm that suddenly appeared behind him. This is... The old man's expression flickered as he gnashed his teeth and said, "I didn't expect Feng Lingling to have such a powerful backer. What a pity that I can't see the wonderful scene of the human race killing each other." The 6 vague figures behind the old man spun at the same time. Amidst the whistling wind, their barely audible voices could be heard. The old man cocked his head and listened to their voices, then shook his head and said with a sigh, "That's right, we need to get down to business. Since Feng Lingling is still alive, there's nothing to see in the struggle for power and profit." The old man sniffled carefully, then took out a green wooden board and carefully rubbed it for a while. A glistening gust of wind spurted out from the wooden board, and a faint red flame could be vaguely seen on it. The old man gritted his teeth and murmured, "Wind Wolf and Flaming Tiger are both gods born by the heaven and earth, and they are gods with excellent innate talents. If they grow, they will have the potential to break through and become ancient gods. I don't care who killed them, I will burn them to ashes. A trace of red light flickered on the wooden board, slowly moving across the wooden board. The white-bearded old man snorted coldly. He nodded with a smile and said, Wind Wolf's soul was completely destroyed, and not even a bit of his remains was left. But that fire tiger still has some energy left in this world. Presumably, the person who killed them didn't have time to take away all of the fire tiger's energy. The white-bearded old man suddenly pointed forward and shouted in a deep voice, that man is not far away. Children, chase after him and kill him. Woo 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 of chi, woo chi in on in and out of. Woo woo. As he flew, he kept absorbing the natural energies in the surroundings to replenish the chaotic energies that he had consumed. The 7 foundation elevating technique was a miraculous technique. He could refine all the natural energies and filthy energies in the world into chaotic energies. Therefore, the speed at which Wu Qi replenished his energy was many times faster than that of ordinary immortal cultivators. In just 15 minutes, he had fully replenished his energy. Weighing the countless treasures in his sleeve, Wu Qi could not help but grin. Once he returned to Anhe City, he would bring several hundred disciples of the Underhand sect to Anhe County and establish an immortal abode in that nameless mountain. With these treasures, he would be able to usher in a period of rapid development for the Underhand sect. Once the overall strength of the sect grew stronger, he would expand the sect and recruit more disciples. With that, Wu Qi would be able to lay down the foundation of the Underhand sect in Zhong province. Even as he was thinking of this, a gust of evil wind suddenly came whistling over from the back of his head. With a sway of his body, Wu Qi abruptly transformed into a clump of fiend aura and scattered in all directions. A fierce gust of wind roared across his body, and a cyan gust of wind blew tens of miles away. Wherever the wind swept across, the ground cracked and rocks shattered. There was a human village in front of it. Hundreds of houses and thousands of mortals were rolled up by the cyan gust of wind, and everything suddenly exploded into powder, then scattered in all directions by the cyan gust of wind. Wherever the gust of wind passed, everything was turned into powder. The life force of the destroyed flowers, trees, mortals, and livestock was extracted by the gust of wind, turning into a gust of wind that emitted a faint glow and blew back. The dark fiend aura suddenly retracted, and Wu Qi's body reformed. He looked in the direction of the gust of wind and saw a blurry figure. He could vaguely make out that it was a young man in human form. He was staring at Wu Qi with a hideous smile on his face, opening his mouth and swallowing the gust of light that contained the life force of countless flowers, trees, and several thousand mortals. A strong gleam flashed across the young man's body, and his body suddenly became much clearer. Who are you? Why did you attack me from behind? Wu Qi asked angrily. A wild wind blew, as another 5 gusts came whistling over. Together with the first young man, they had Wu Qi tightly surrounded. Staring at Wu Qi, all 6 of them burst into laughter. None of them answered Wu Qi's question. Tilting their heads, they were sizing Wu Qi up in a calm and unruffled manner, like a group of mighty lions sizing up their prey. Wu Qi looked at them unhappily, and his face darkened. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave now, he said coolly. With a blink of his body, Wu Qi transformed into a beam of dark light and sped away into the distance. He did not choose the direction of Anhe City, but a random direction. But, as soon as he took off, 6 strong gusts of wind followed closely behind him, whistling shrilly. 6 fearsome gusts of wind intertwined with each other, transforming into an invisible whirlpool that sucked at Wu Qi's body. His speed became slower and slower, and gradually, he became as slow as an ordinary man walking on the ground. Amidst the whistling sound of the wind, the air within 1,000 miles was stirred and turned into a 6-colored gust of wind that kept spinning crazily around Wu Qi and his company. Gradually, the gust of wind, green, red, white, black, green, and blue, blanketed everything. Wind blades that seemed to have materialized tore the ground apart, leaving countless deep and shallow cracks on the ground. All the towns and villages within 1,000 miles were struck by the gust of wind. Countless houses were blown away, and countless mortals and livestock were swept up into the sky, screaming and screaming. For a moment, the sky was filled with broken house materials, mortals, and livestock, dancing and rolling in the gust of wind. The terrifying gale crushed everything in its path. A large amount of blood kept oozing out from under the skin of the humans and animals. All of their blood was compressed together by the gale, slowly flowing into the bodies of the 6 young men along with the flow of the wind. Their bodies were replenished by the blood and energy essence, and gradually became clearer and clearer. Wu Qi felt that his body was getting heavier and heavier, as if countless serpents had coiled around his body, making it hard for him to move. The magnetic force was pulsating crazily around him, producing loud buzzing noises. The powerful force was trying to drag him forward, but as he was trapped by the 6-colored gust of wind, the magnetic force was neutralized as well. Gradually, Wu Qi came to a halt in midair. Damn it! Wu Qi rolled his eyes, and suddenly, he realized the origin of these people. These 6 young men were all divine gods, born from the power of the natural law and the tremendous natural powers found in some feng shui caves. These 6 young men were all powerful divine gods born from the natural law. These days, he had indeed provoked these people. Wind Wolf and Fire Tiger, the 2 newly born divine gods, were devoured by him and Ao Buzan respectively. Everything of Wind Wolf was destroyed by Wu Qi, and all of his power had become Wu Qi's. However, after devouring Fire Tiger, Ao Buzan was still digesting and absorbing Fire Tiger's power. Fire Tiger didn't completely disappear from this world. Therefore, powerful beings could find Ao Buzan through the lingering power of Fire Tiger. Naturally, they could find Wu Qi. After figuring out the key, without saying a word, Wu Qi flicked his 10 fingers. A large sheet of black light shot out from his fingertips, condensing into 6 primordial runes the size of a rice bucket, and smashed forcefully onto the bodies of the 6 youths. "Explode!" cried Wu Qi in a low voice. 6 loud booms rang out, as the 6 young men, who were laughing wildly, were caught off guard and hit by the primordial runes unleashed by Wu Qi. Their limbs were ripped to shreds by the explosion, and the whirlpool of wind that had taken shape suddenly collapsed and dispersed. Wu Qi felt his body lightened as he transformed into a stream of dark light, wheeling rapidly around the 6 youths who were ripped to shreds by the explosion. "You came to me on your own accord." Abruptly, the chaotic energy in his body transformed into a huge vortex. Exercising the mystic technique of the 7 foundation elevating technique, Wu Qi opened his mouth and inhaled at the 6 young men. Now that his cultivation base had improved greatly, he had the magical power of a 27th tier heaven immortal, the fleshly body of a 27th tier heaven immortal, and the dragon transformation script, which was equivalent to the fleshly strength of a 27th tier heaven dragon. A loud boom rang out, as a chaotic black hole the size of a water tank suddenly appeared next to Wu Qi's mouth. A frightening suction force came from the black hole. The bodies of the 2 young men were ripped to shreds by Wu Qi's primordial runes, and before they could reform their bodies, they were swallowed by Wu Qi. A vast amount of chaotic energy swarmed up and invaded their bodies in a flash, trapping the clumps of true spirits in their bodies. With the chaotic energy rolling out, Wu Qi exercised the bloodline of Gale and the divine ability of controlling wind, easily killing the true spirits of the 2 young men, then spreading all their power into his body. Abruptly, Wu Qi let out a joyful howl. His long hair stood straight up into the sky, and his eyes flickered with a bright gleam. An enormous aura kept spreading out from his body. After receiving the replenishment of the laws of heavenly Tao from the 2 wind gods, as well as the formidable overall strength of a 28th tier heaven immortal, Wu Qi's cultivation base, which had been stuck at the bottleneck of 27th tier, suddenly grew by a tiny bit. It was this tiny bit of growth that shattered the bottleneck, and caused the energy in his body to surge up like the mighty waves of the Yangtze River. Laughing wildly, Wu Qi clenched his teeth and said furiously, "A god of wind? Aren't you sending yourself to my doorstep?" With the bloodline of Gale in his body, perhaps Wu Qi would be afraid of other gods, but the wind gods should not have come to him. Before the other 4 young men could come to their senses, Wu Qi let out a wild laugh, opened his mouth and swallowed all of them into his stomach. A dreadful whistling of the wind came down from the sky, followed by an exasperated and humiliated voice. How dare you? You bastard! Spit it out! Spit it out! Chapter 555. Woo woo woo, a frightening howling of the wind was heard coming from the top of his head. With a sway of his body, a large sheet of green light suddenly rushed out from his body. Like a feather, he flew out gracefully along with the wild wind, and was not hurt by the wind at all. A black pillar of wind, about 1 mile in diameter, came crashing down from the sky, nearly brushing past his body. The wind column smashed straight into the ground, easily penetrating through the solid ground like a piece of tofu. Not long after that, a strong wind roar came from underground. The area with a diameter of 1,000 miles began to shake violently, and countless cracks appeared on the ground. Strong black winds rose from these cracks, tearing everything on the ground apart like countless sharp long blades. Cities, villages, woods, mountains, hills, lakes, all tangible things were turned into ashes by the strong black winds. The land with a diameter of 1,000 miles collapsed, and everything was torn apart and destroyed by the strong winds. Everything that was destroyed was left with only gray dust. It had lost all of its spiritual energy and vitality, and was just a withered and decayed dust. A strong smell of decay began to spread out from the void. The land covered by the strong black winds was like a dungeon that hadn't been opened for billions of years. The smell of decay was nauseating. Wu Qi moved lightly in the strong wind. The strong wind couldn't touch his body, and he himself had transformed into a gust of wind, a wisp of air, drifting here and there in the strong wind like a puff of smoke. Silently, he exercised the wind-controlling divine ability found in the Song of Gale. The chaotic energies in his body were crazily roiling and twisting, stripping and absorbing all the energies of the 6 young men layer by layer. In his spiritual ocean, the innate chaotic divine soul shone with a dazzling golden light. The laws of wind and atmosphere contained in the 6 young men's true spirits kept surging into Wu Qi's innate chaotic divine soul, turning into a part of Wu Qi's divine soul. In Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, a new gust of wind was born, whistling and rocking in his spiritual ocean. Countless wind pillars were twisting and turning in his spiritual ocean, rubbing and colliding with each other, producing a faintly discernible roar of wind and thunder that could be heard echoing out of his body. The black gale gradually dissipated, and a white-bearded old man in a black robe appeared in front of Wu Qi, gnashing his teeth. The 1,000 miles wide ground was turned into nothingness, and 100 miles deep, 1,000 miles wide, round-shaped pit was created. Far away, a few great rivers had been pouring water into the pit. The surging water poured into the pit, forming a few 100 miles high waterfalls. It wouldn't be long before this pit became a large lake, and the people who used to live on this land would never be remembered again. The prefecture overseer, Feng Lingling, was nowhere to be found. Currently, Fu Sangyi and the others were busy handing over the power of Zhong province. Therefore, no one had noticed what was happening here. Perhaps, someone had noticed it, but no one would care about it now, and no one would come to deal with it. The power of Zhong province was the most important thing. As for the deaths of some people and the destruction of some cities, it was not a big deal at all. Wu Qi floated slowly amidst the breeze. Narrowing his eyes, he stared at the white-bearded old man and asked coolly, "Why did you attack me?" The old man clenched his teeth tightly, glaring at Wu Qi as he growled, "Spit them out. Spit out the 6 sons of my clan. You damned bastard. How dare you devour a god? Even the immortal kings of the celestial court would not dare to do that. How dare you devour a god?" Wu Qi shook his head, burped, and said with a bitter smile, "I've digested them all. Ugh, not even a little bit of residue is left." Following Wu Qi's burp, a great gust of wind kept rushing out of his body. Crisp cracking noises could be heard coming from all his joints, while his aura grew stronger and stronger. Strange chaotic vortexes could be seen flashing in his eyes, while his long black hair fluttered behind his head. His body became hazy, as if he had merged into the void around him. Slowly raising both hands, Wu Qi exercised his cultivation technique silently, and the energy in his body kept rising. Countless energy stones and immortal stones in his sleeves fused into his body, transforming the enormous energy into chaotic energy. Crisp clanking noises could be heard coming out of Wu Qi's sleeves, and an enormous amount of energy spread out from them. It was the energy that Wu Qi did not have time to transform. In just a few breaths of time, Wu Qi had consumed all the energy stones and immortal stones he stole from Feng Lingling's storehouse. 26th tier, 25th tier, 24th tier, 23rd tier, 22nd tier, 21st tier. Wu Qi's body flickered between blurred and clear. Every time his body became clear, Wu Qi's cultivation base would rise by 1 tier. The 6 heavenly gods he had devoured were all heavenly gods of wind element. With the enormous energy, the frightening devouring ability of the 7 sacred spirit army, the Song of Gale, and the marks of laws in the 6 heavenly gods' true spirits, Wu Qi had forcibly pushed his cultivation base to the 21st tier. I've digested them all. Not a single bit left. Wu Qi looked at the white-bearded old man and said with a faint smile, I have to thank them. If not for their help, how could my overall strength have improved so fast, as I was limited to the 27th tier and could not transcend? The old man stared at Wu Qi in astonishment, then roared with both shock and anger, You've devoured them so quickly? What fiend cultivation technique are you practicing? How is this possible? How could it be so fast? With your cultivation base, how could you make a breakthrough so quickly? Where is your heavenly tribulation? Why wasn't there any heavenly tribulation when you made the breakthrough? Wu Qi smiled, shook his head, and said, Cut the crap. Why did you sneak attack me? Is it because of those 2 ignorant gods who have just been born? The old man's face froze. Clenching his teeth, he stared at Wu Qi and said grimly, You are the one who killed Wind Wolf and Fire Tiger. The emperor was right. As long as I come to the central province, I will be able to find you. Kid, tell me your name. You've already killed 8 gods under the imperial monarch's command. You're bound to be ground into ashes, bound to have your soul dispersed, and bound to enjoy the cruelest punishment in this world. Ao Buzan's dragon head carefully poked out from under Wu Qi's clothes. He glanced at the old man and murmured in a low voice, Old man, which old fool is this emperor you are talking about? Wind god, fire god, you should be working for the Eastern Wood Emperor, right? The Eastern Wood Emperor. This dreadful character who had existed since the beginning of time represented the ancient gods of wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. Naturally, the newly born wind god and fire god were all his subordinates. The old man glanced at Ao Buzan, and the wooden plank in his hands suddenly flashed with a dazzling red light. The old man roared, You evildoer! Fire Tiger was swallowed by you? Fire Tiger is not completely dead yet. Spit it out, spit it out. Quick! Ao Buzan shook his head lazily, sneered, and said, You think you can spit it out after it entered Lao Tzu's mouth? It's like a woman who has slept with Lao Tzu. Even if you spit it out, she will not be the original one. What do you want him for? Burping, Ao Buzan rubbed his claws at Wu Qi and said with a dry smile, Master, I still can't fight in the near future. I'll leave this old man to you. Wu Qi nodded slowly. He shoved Ao Buzan's head back into his sleeve, then lightly clapped his hands and said, Old fool, since you attacked me for the sake of those 2 fools, I have nothing to say. After killing you, I need to go back and teach my disciples a lesson. Laughing mockingly, Wu Qi shook his head disdainfully and said, Is the Eastern Wood Emperor very powerful? I'll find him sooner or later. Recalling the enmity between Reverend Gale and the Eastern Wood Emperor, Wu Qi sneered. Suddenly, a blinding green light burst out from his body. After being replenished by the energy of 6 gods and devouring all the immortal stones and energy stones in Feng Lingling's storehouse, Wu Qi had forcibly raised his magic power to the realm of 21st tier heaven immortal, making his overall strength a few times stronger than before. On top of that, The Gale bloodline in his body had also devoured a thread of the essence aura of the god of wind, making it much stronger. Under the old man's terrified gaze, Wu Qi suddenly transformed into a green Gale divine beast, about 1 mile long. Impossible! The old man cried out fiercely, "How could you be a Gale? You can't be a Gale!" Accompanied by a shrill cry, the old man suddenly transformed into a gust of black wind and fled into the distance. The Gale divine beasts were born with the ability to control the wind. In other words, the Gale was the controller of the wind generated by the heaven and earth, the natural enemy of all gods of wind. An adult Gale had the overall strength to challenge a wind god. Although this old man was a top-grade heaven immortal, he had lost the courage to fight back when facing the Gale transformed by Wu Qi. It was just like how an adult antelope would still feel an instinctive fear when facing a newborn lion. The relationship between a Gale and a god of wind was like the relationship between a lion and an antelope. It was a relationship of absolute suppression and deterrence, with no exceptions. The old man possessed the overall strength of a 9th-tier heaven immortal. However, when he sensed the pure aura of the Gale bloodline emanating from Wu Qi, he was truly frightened. He had completely forgotten the huge gap between his overall strength and Wu Qi's. Frightened out of his wits, all he could think of was to flee. Wu Qi laughed evilly. Abruptly, he exercised the Gale bloodline and exercised the wind-controlling technique found in the Song of Gale, opening his mouth and sucking the old man. Mercy! The old man had no will to resist, and obediently allowed himself to be swallowed into Wu Qi's stomach. The chaotic energy twisted around the white-bearded old man, smoothly separating the white-bearded old man's true spirit from his enormous magic power. While laughing happily, Wu Qi stirred the chaotic energy and turned the old man's true spirit into a pulp. After that, without saying a word, Wu Qi transformed into a beam of light and sped away into the distance. Right after Wu Qi left, a large sheet of flame burst out from where he was standing. A red-bearded old man appeared out of thin air, together with 6 youths shrouded in flames. The old man sniffed and cried out in alarm, "How is that possible? Mu Su had actually failed. Mu Su's cultivation base is about the same as mine, but even he was killed. If I focus on hunting the murderer, won't I be in danger as well?" Shaking his head, the old man spun and left with the 6 youths. "Boys, let's go back quickly and wait for the emperor to send some experts to hunt down the murderer. We can't afford to offend such a ferocious man who treats us gods as tonics." The sound of wind, rain, and thunder filled the air as more and more gods arrived. However, when they sensed the aura of Mu Su being completely devoured in the air, they all turned and left with unsightly expressions. Mu Su's cultivation base was about the same as theirs, and yet, Wu Qi had devoured him. These gods were scared out of their wits, and no longer dared to linger around. Let Qing Emperor send some experts to hunt down the murderer. As heaven immortal gods, they did not have the courage to do so. An even greater trouble was waiting for Wu Qi ahead. Chapter 556. In the void, Princess Zhanglu was controlling the 5-colored silver lotus throne to travel at high speed. Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon lay panting on the lotus throne. Lord Xiansheng had a wound on his chest, and a large piece of flesh on Catfish Flood Dragon's buttocks was cut off by a sword beam. Both of them had returned to their original forms, and were working hard to repair their fleshly bodies. The flood dragons had strong fleshly bodies and extremely tenacious life force. Although both of them had suffered serious injuries, their lives were not in danger. Peppermint and Angelica squatted carefully beside Lord Xiansheng and Catfish Flood Dragon, dipped clean handkerchiefs in water, mixed some medicinal pills to treat external injuries, and applied them to their wounds. Their movements were gentle, but as the medicinal pills were personally concocted by Wu Qi, when they touched the wounds, Lord Xiansheng grimaced in pain, while Catfish Flood Dragon simply cursed out loud. Goldhorn and Silverhorn coiled themselves into a snake formation, standing awkwardly next to Princess Zhanglu to protect her. Goldhorn was grumbling, complaining why they had to encounter fierce immortals who robbed them when they were traveling through the void through the great teleportation formation. Silverhorn, on the other hand, was savoring the wonderful taste of the robber, complaining that Catfish Flood Dragon's mouth was too big. She had swallowed nearly half of the immortal in one gulp, and it was obvious that the two brothers and Lord Xianqing had suffered a great loss. Princess Zhongli's face darkened. Her brows were knitted tightly together as she stared ahead with a cold look in her eyes. Mi Xian sect of Dahua Qiyan Heavenly Realm. I'll settle this score with you sooner or later. A few months ago, with the help of Princess Zhongli's innate divine ability, Princess Zhonglu and her company should have arrived at Panga Continent. But, when they were less than 7 days away from Panga Continent, they ran into a group of immortals who claimed to be from Mi Xian's sect of Dahua Qiyan Heavenly Realm. When Princess Zhonglu controlled the Silver Lotus throne to surpass them, these immortals suddenly attacked. A bolt of immortal thunder struck down and disturbed the tunnel of space and time, dragging Princess Zhonglu and her companions into the turbulence of space and time. Those immortals had their eyes on Princess Zhongli's Silver Lotus throne and knew that it was an extraordinary treasure, so they wanted to take advantage of the situation to rob it. Who knew that although the cultivation of Princess Zhongli's group was slightly lower, none of them were easy to provoke. Princess Zhonglu forcibly suppressed the turbulence of time and space with her 5-colored divine light. Lord Xiansheng and the others launched an attack, killing more than half of the dozen immortals of Mi Xian's sect who had attacked them, and the one with the strongest cultivation base was devoured by Goldhorn, Silverhorn, and a few others. The rest of the immortals were so frightened that they fled with mystic arts and were thrown into some corner. The immortals of Mi Xian's sect had fled without a trace, but Princess Zhonglu and her companions had suffered a great deal. Even with the 5-colored divine light suppressing the turbulence of time and space, they were still swept off their course and thrown into a place closest to Panga Continent called the Hangyuan Dark Beginning Heavenly Realm. Left with no other choice, Princess Zhonglu and her company had no choice but to use the teleportation formation to travel to Panga Continent from the Eternal Origin Heavenly Realm. However, they were also delayed for several months in the turbulence of space, which greatly delayed their journey. Looking at a spot of white light looming in front of them, Princess Zhonglu cried out in a deep voice, "Brother Xiansheng, Catfish, how are your injuries? We are about to reach Panga Continent, and no one can tell what is going on here. You must be careful later." Lord Xiansheng gave a muffled snort and transformed into his human form. With a coiling dragon halberd in his hand, he cried out in a deep voice, "Don't worry. I can still kill a few immortals with my halberd. Sister-in-law, just put away the Silver Lotus throne. Remember not to expose such a precious treasure in front of others." Meanwhile, Catfish rose to her feet, shivering all over, and transformed back into her human form. Gritting her teeth, she stroked her buttocks and said in a gloomy voice, I'm fine. I can still bear this minor injury. Mi Xian sect of Dahua Red Flame Heavenly Realm, I'll remember them. Sooner or later, I will eat all of them alive. Only then will I be able to vent my anger." Tilting his head, Goldhorn gave Catfish's buttocks a sideways glance, then suddenly threw his head back and heaved a long sigh. What a pity. That fat meat weighed at least 300 kilograms. How could it be torn apart by the sword beam? It's better to leave it for us brothers to enjoy. The meat of a catfish demon who has cultivated into a flood dragon can be cooked into a saliva catfish with some pepper and chili. TSK, how delicious. Catfish's face darkened abruptly. She stared fixedly at Goldhorn and Silverhorn and said coldly, I'm also very interested in the dish of dragon and tiger. Standing off to the side, Lord Xiansheng shook his head helplessly and said, Dragon and tiger? Can you not involve me in this? Catfish, Goldhorn, and Silverhorn quarreled with each other, their saliva flying in all directions. It seemed that they were about to start a fight on the Silver Lotus throne. Princess Zhonglu rubbed her temples with her fingers helplessly and breathed a long sigh. Sighing faintly, she performed an incantation gesture with both hands and cried out, G. Abruptly, The silver lotus throne burst into a five-colored light, then transformed into a stream of light and shot into Princess Zhongli's forehead. The enormous spatial pressure in the tunnel came pressing down from above. Catfish, Gold Horn, and Silver Horn, who were quarreling, no longer had the strength to be distracted. They hastily gathered around Princess Zhongli and unleashed their defensive light at the same time. White waves surged around Lord Xiansheng, black water surged around Catfish, while raging flames and cold air soared into the sky around Gold Horn and Silver Horn, transforming into a red and white light that enveloped everyone. Meanwhile, Princess Zhongli flicked her sleeve. A five-colored light burst out and merged with the defensive light around everyone, shielding them as they flew forward at lightning speed. The white light in front of them grew bigger and brighter. In the blink of an eye, everyone felt their bodies lightened, and they had walked out of a huge teleportation formation. Fresh and sweet air greeted them, and rich natural energy rushed into their bodies. It seemed that they did not need to circulate their energy to regulate their breathing, and the magic power in their bodies was slowly growing. What a great place! Lord Xiansheng cried out excitedly. It's indeed a great place. Catfish Flood Dragon widened her eyes, glancing at the immortals and mortals who were walking around with her pair of tiny eyes. Drooling from the corner of her mouth, she murmured, since the people here live in a place with such rich natural energy, their flesh and blood essence are indeed very abundant. They must be delicious and chewy. Gold Horn and Silver Horn were even more embarrassed than Catfish. Their mouths were wide open, saliva dripping down from the corner of their mouths, and soon a large puddle had gathered around them. Only the sisters, Angelica and Peppermint, followed cautiously at Princess Zhongli's side, grabbing Princess Zhongli's sleeve with their little hands as they glanced around curiously. It was a mountain that had been cut off in the middle. Hundreds of teleportation formations, large and small, were densely constructed on a flat land about 100 miles in diameter. The nearby formations were constantly flashing with strong lights as immortals and cultivators walked out of them, while a large number of immortals and cultivators walked into one of the formations with either complacent or panicked expressions. Dozens of pavilions stood towering on the clouds around the mountain. The palaces and pavilions on the east were built in the style of Dayu, tall and unadorned. Countless armored soldiers stood in front of the palaces, staring coldly at them. The palaces on the clouds on the west were built in the classic style of the celestial court, gorgeous, exquisite, luxurious, and grand. Every pillar and tile glowed with a dazzling light, forming a strong contrast with the palaces and pavilions on the east. Some immortals, clad in long robes and tall crowns, were seen walking on clouds in the palaces on the west. They were laughing freely and greeting the people around them. As Princess Zhongli watched curiously, a few officials in green robes and little hats standing next to the teleportation formation shouted, "Those immortal cultivators, come out now. Don't delay the people behind. Come out now." They pointed at the pavilions on the west and shouted, "Go to the registration office and report your identity, background, sect, and other information for the record, then go to the Eastern Immortal Pass to get your identity certificate. Only then can you walk freely on Pangu continent. Otherwise, the officials of Dayu have the right to kill all immortals who don't have an identity certificate at will." Kill at will? Princess Zhongli could not help but frown at his fierce words. She glanced at the busy immortals and cultivators around her, then summoned a cloud and brought Lord Xiansheng and his company to a pavilion on the west, which had the most people coming and going. A golden plaque hung on the lofty pavilion, glowing faintly, with the words "Registration Office" written on it in purple. As soon as Princess Zhongli and her company stepped into the registration office, they saw 3 long rows of tables, behind which countless immortal officials were busy registering the identity and background of the immortals and cultivators who came in. The chatter of voices lingered in the air, and some people were even shouting something loudly. The place was so noisy that it looked like a vegetable market in the mortal world. Coincidentally, 3 heaven immortals had just left one of the tables. A handsome young immortal official, clad in a white robe and sitting behind the table, beckoned to Princess Zhongli and said, "Newcomer, come here. What are you doing on Pangu continent?" Upon hearing that, Princess Zhongli walked over. The immortal official produced a few scrolls and threw them on the table, asking Princess Zhang Lu to fill them out truthfully. After that, he began to nag. He warned Princess Zhang Lu that if she came to Panga continent to look for some spirit herbs, she could go to the special immortal markets to buy them, and it was better not to venture into the mountains to pick them, as that would bring trouble to the army of Diyu. Also, if she came to Panga continent to establish a sect, there must be at least a high-tier gold immortal in the sect. Otherwise, it was better not to even think about it. Because of Princess Zhang Li's extraordinary beauty, the young immortal official excitedly told her many things to pay attention to in Panga continent. He especially reminded Princess Zhang Lu that she should never offend the officials of Diyu, never offend the officials of Diyu, and never offend the officials of Diyu. Of course, if Princess Zhang Lu was backed by an almighty expert like a primordial immortal, or if she was a high-ranking immortal official of the celestial court, then it would be a different story. With a smile on her face, Princess Zhang Lu filled in a few scrolls with a fabricated identity and background, while listening attentively to the immortal official's advice. As she had just arrived in a strange place, these were the lessons that Princess Zhang Lu urgently needed. At this moment, a handsome young man wearing a black and white cloak and a white jade crown strode into the registration office, surrounded by nearly 100 immortals. He had the air of an emperor and was surrounded by nearly 100 immortals. As he strode forward, the young man bellowed angrily, "Useless fools! You can't even collect a mere 100 spirit herbs. What's the use of keeping you?" Before his voice could fade away, the young man suddenly saw Goldhorn and Silverhorn, who were coiled up next to Princess Zhang Lu, drooling. His eyes went wide in an instant. Dragon pythons of fire and ice? The spirit paste extracted from their internal organs can be used to replace the 36 main herbs needed in the prescription. Wonderful, Lord Father's injury can be treated. Men, capture them for Ben Jun. The young man pointed at Goldhorn and Silverhorn, and a group of immortals immediately leaped forward. Chapter 557. Goldhorn and Silverhorn were struck dumb as they stared in surprise at the immortals who were charging at them. The brothers thought that since they did not cause any trouble to those immortals should burn incense sticks and pray to Buddha to repay their vows. So, why would these immortals still come to trouble them? They opened their mouths and shot out a beam of red and a beam of white light, which tangled together and turned into a meter-thick spiral beam of light. The three immortals, who were facing Goldhorn and Silverhorn, cried out in alarm. At the same time, a large sheet of auspicious light sprayed out of their bodies. A shield, a mirror, and a flag, three defensive immortal artifacts emerged out of thin air, emitting a bright light to protect their masters. Goldhorn and Silverhorn roared furiously, and the flame and cold air they shot out suddenly soared to a few times more powerful. Three crisp cracking noises rang out as the beam of red and white light left large holes in the three immortal artifacts. The auspicious light and auspicious air vanished in an instant, and the three heaven immortals howled miserably. Before they could unleash other immortal artifacts, they were hit by Goldhorn and Silverhorn's attack. The bodies of the three of them first turned crimson red, emitting an extremely high temperature like burning rocks. Then, their bodies, which were about to burst into flames, suddenly shrank. A terrifying chill ruled over every cell in their bodies, and countless cracks suddenly appeared on their bodies. In just a fraction of a second, the bodies of the three heaven immortals had gone back and forth thousands of times in the extreme heat and cold. Although their bodies were extremely strong, they could not withstand the poisonous flame and cold air breathed out by dragon pythons of fire and ice. The bodies of the three heaven immortals disintegrated into countless ice crystals and powder. Their immortal souls howled miserably as they transformed into three beams of golden light and were about to flee into the sky. Goldhorn and Silverhorn opened their mouths at the same time and sucked the two immortal souls into their mouths. A dazzling light burst out from the scales on the brothers' bodies, and the strength of the scales increased a little. Just as the other immortal soul fled less than 100 feet away, a huge catfish head suddenly appeared in front of him. Catfish Flood Dragon opened her mouth and swallowed the immortal soul, then burped contentedly. Accompanied by a loud burp that sounded like the rumbling of thunder, the wound on Catfish Flood Dragon's buttocks healed rapidly. In just a blink of an eye, the wound had completely healed, and there was not even a scar left. The other immortals were dumbfounded. Only then did they realize that they were facing a primordial species, the infamous dragon pythons of fire and ice from the ancient times. This was a ferocious creature that ran amok in the ancient times, eating true dragons as food, immortals as desserts, and primordial gods as snacks after meals. Dozens of heaven immortals roared in unison. One after another, they unleashed their immortal items to protect themselves, then struck at Gold Horn and Silver Horn with immortal spells. For a moment, the sky was filled with flashes and flashes of light. Tens of huge hands and ropes of immortal energy, as well as countless restrictive runes, fell down like raindrops and smashed at Gold Horn and Silver Horn. The brothers roared furiously as their bodies expanded abruptly. In just a blink of an eye, they had grown from the size of a bowl to the size of a water tank, and were over 1,000 feet long. Then, they spread the strangely shaped wings on their backs, sending out streams of flame and cold air. The vast registration office suddenly turned into a hell on earth. Extreme heat and cold ruled over everything, and the tables, chairs, and furnishings in the room were shattered. The cultivation base of the immortal officials in the registration office was not very strong. More than 90% of them were 36th tier heaven immortals, and the strongest among them was only a 35th tier heaven immortal. In the face of the cold air and flame unleashed by Gold Horn and Silver Horn, these immortal officials could only let out a miserable howl before their bodies disintegrated. The sky was filled with fleeing immortal souls. At least 300 immortal officials and immortal officials were killed by the cold and flame aura unleashed by the brothers. 300 immortal souls were swaying wildly in the air, emitting golden and purple light that hurt the eyes. Gold Horn and Silver Horn burst into laughter. Together with Catfish, they opened their mouths and began to crazily devour the fleeing immortal souls. 3 huge mouths opened and 3 invisible vortexes controlled everything in the registration office. One immortal soul after another kept falling into their mouths, turning into surging energies that flowed through their bodies. Terrible cold air and heat waves surged in all directions. When the various restrictive spells unleashed by the immortals touched Gold Horn and Silver Horn, they disintegrated in a blink of an eye like waves slapping a reef. The restrictive spells unleashed by dozens of heaven immortals had no effect at all. Relying solely on their innate divine abilities, Gold Horn and Silver Horn easily disintegrated all their attacks. Countless runes spun rapidly on their scales, while cold air and heat waves burst out of Gold Horn and Silver Horn's bodies. Not only were the restrictive spells unleashed by dozens of heaven immortals shattered, the cold air and heat waves even pushed back, causing the immortal items carried by these heaven immortals to produce crisp cracking noises. The heaven immortals were so frightened that they took a few steps back and hurriedly escaped from the range of the cold air and heat waves unleashed by Gold Horn and Silver Horn. But, they had only taken a few steps back when 2 heaven immortals let out a cry of terror. A huge hammer, roughly the size of a small house, with a square shape and no decorative patterns, came smashing down with a terrible force and smashing the heads of the 2 heaven immortals. A dazzling light burst out of the heads of the 2 heaven immortals. Their defensive immortal items were an immortal robe and a long silk. Both immortal items emitted an auspicious light at the same time, bringing up large clouds that blocked under the terrible hammer. The hammer smashed down, and the 2 immortal items and their masters groaned together. Then, it was the second, the third, the fourth. In just a blink of an eye, before the crowd of heaven immortals could come to their rescue, Catfish, who had rolled up her sleeves and revealed 2 thick, dark, muscular arms, had smashed the 2 pitiful heaven immortals 360 times. The hammer weighed over 5 million kilograms, and together with the frightening brute strength that Catfish Flood Dragon had acquired after cultivating the dragon transformation script, every swing of the hammer could shatter a lofty mountain, and break a great river. The 2 heaven immortals who were attacked by Catfish had a rather strong cultivation base, and the quality of their immortal items was also pretty good. But, after suffering 360 heavy blows in a row, they finally could not withstand Catfish's storm-like attacks. The immortal robe and the long silk were torn to pieces, and their heads were smashed by the hammer before they could even make a grunt. The heads of the two heaven immortals shattered like eggshells, and golden blood and brain matter sprayed all over the sky. Suddenly, a long, sticky tongue stuck out of Catfish's mouth, rolled up the two dead heaven immortals, and shoved them into her mouth. A great amount of black mist sprayed out of her mouth. As soon as the two heaven immortals' immortal souls rushed out of their shattered heads, they were immediately stained by the black mist. The two golden immortal souls howled miserably as plumes of black smoke rose from their bodies due to the corrosion. Then, they were swallowed by Catfish with a single gulp. The other heaven immortals were horrified, and they roared and scolded her. Tacitly, they abandoned the Gold Horn and Silver Horn brothers and turned to face Catfish. In their opinion, Gold Horn and Silver Horn were indeed difficult to deal with, but Catfish was just a fat fish-headed monster. Even though she had cultivated the body of a flood dragon, she was still easy to deal with. Before these heaven immortals could attack her, a purple thunderbolt suddenly tore through the void. Lord Xianqing scolded in a low voice. In a flash, the halberd turned into countless purple thunderbolts and swept toward the dozens of heaven immortals in the registration office with a deafening rumble. The sky was filled with thunderbolts, and the field of vision was filled with an eerie chill. With the force of a thunderbolt, the purple thunderbolts smashed on these heaven immortals almost at the same time. Lord Xianqing was a direct descendant of the Dragon King, and the set of combat skills he had inherited from his ancestors was very impressive. In just a fraction of a second, he swung his coiled dragon halberd, and the dozens of heaven immortals who had attacked Gold Horn and Silver Horn were all struck by him. Each of them was struck nearly 100 times by the halberd, causing smoke to rise from their bodies. The tremendous force shook them, causing them to lose their footing and retreat quickly. Unfortunately, the halberd in Lord Xianqing's hand was just an ordinary spirit artifact, not a good treasure. If he had an immortal artifact of a similar grade, his blow just now would have been enough to kill these dozens of heaven immortals. Spirit artifacts could not break the protective immortal artifacts of these heaven immortals. It was true that Lord Xianqing had forced the dozens of heaven immortals back with just one blow, and his mighty power had intimidated everyone present. But, the halberd in his hand was also shattered into dozens of pieces. The item spirit in the halberd, a purple thunderbolt soul, let out a miserable wail and shattered into pieces along with the halberd. Lord Xianqing staggered back a few steps. Standing in front of Princess Xianglu, Angelica, and Peppermint, he growled through clenched teeth, "Damn it! So many immortals and so many immortal artifacts. What a pity! If I had an immortal artifact in my hand, all of you would be dead today." The faces of the immortals who attacked Gold Horn and Silver Horn fell. None of them could see how Lord Xianqing struck. Before they could see the trajectory of the halberd, all of them were hit at the same time. If Lord Xianqing really had an immortal artifact in his hand, perhaps their protective immortal artifacts would have been pierced by now, and he alone would have killed dozens of heaven immortals. Chi-Chi sucked in a cold breath, while the dozens of heaven immortals took a few steps back at the same time, looking in horror at the young man who had ordered them to strike just now. The young man's face darkened slightly as he gave Lord Xianqing a fearful look, then turned to look at Princess Xianglu. When he saw Princess Xiangli's stunningly beautiful face, as well as the luxurious aura emanating from her, the young man's eyes immediately lit up, and a smile emerged on his face. The young man cleared his throat, then took a slow step forward and came several tens of feet away from Princess Xianglu. Then, he slowly bowed to her. "Young lady, I'm Li Qinghua, and I pay my respects to you." Princess Xianglu gave him a cold look and asked coldly, "Why did you attack us for no reason? Tell me the reason first." Li Qinghua smiled faintly and said leisurely, "My father is the sovereign of Myriad Immortal Alliance. Have you ever heard of the great name of Myriad Immortal Alliance?" When Li Qinghua told her that his father was the sovereign of Myriad Immortal Alliance, the faces of the few old immortals with white beards flickered at the same time, and they gave him a discontented glare. But, Li Qinghua was fascinated by Princess Zhang Li's beauty, so he had no time to care about the expressions of these old immortals. Hurried footsteps were heard coming from outside the registration office's pavilion, and a large group of Deyu's armored soldiers had gathered outside. Faint ripples of immortal energy could be sensed coming from above their heads, as the immortal officials of the Celestial Court who were in charge of controlling the teleportation formation had arrived. Heavily surrounded, the registration office was completely surrounded. Chapter 558. Princess Zhang knitted her brows into a frown as she casually grabbed a few blank identity certificates that she had prepared on the table. Then, a five-colored divine ray burst out from her body like a great flood, enveloping Catfish Flood Dragon and the others. The surrounding void shook abruptly, and the tremendous force of the spatial vibration made those heaven immortals bleed from their mouths and noses. Meanwhile, Princess Zhang and her companions had already teleported away. A crisp cracking noise rang out as the three-layered light barrier that enveloped the entire pavilion shattered, and the five-colored divine ray unleashed by Princess Zhang smashed a huge hole in it. A rain of light poured out, and the immortals and Deyu soldiers watched as Princess Zhang turned into a beam of five-colored light and vanished into the distant sky. The five-colored divine ray flew at an incredible speed, and even the teleportation of the immortals was not as fast as it. Li Qinghua, who ordered the attack on Gold Horn and Silver Horn, gave a furious roar as he soared into the sky with dozens of heaven immortals around him, turning into streams of light as they chased after Princess Zhang. But, they had only flown less than a mile into the sky when hundreds of immortals, who had been caught off guard by Princess Zhang, struck at them at the same time. A great sheet of light sprinkled down as hundreds of immortal swords came smashing down with a cold air, while a great number of immortal thunders shot out like raindrops. "How dare you?" Li Qinghua snapped. "Do you know who I am? I am the young master of Myriad Immortal Alliance." The attacking immortals froze, and their immortal swords flew back to them, while the thunders were forcibly deflected and smashed heavily into a distant hill. The immortal thunders exploded, and dozens of hills vanished amidst the blinding light. An immortal official with the highest status snapped, "Are you really the young master of Myriad Immortal Alliance? If that's the case, it's a misunderstanding." Li Qinghua snorted coldly. With a wave of his hand, he led the dozens of heaven immortals around him and chased after Princess Zhang. But, shadows flashed in front of him, and in the next moment, dozens of heavily armored Deyu generals appeared in front of Li Qinghua. Their bodies were shrouded in white and gray light screens. Apparently, they had crushed their bone talismans and were ready to fight. A golden-armored general stood in front of Li Qinghua with a pair of machetes in his hands, looked him up and down, and said with a sneer, "The young master of the Myriad Immortal Alliance? Well, I was just worried about not being able to find you. Hey, be tactful and come with us. There are a lot of things that we need to explain to your union of 10,000 immortals." A murderous look flashed across Li Qinghua's face as he pointed at the golden-armored general and bellowed, "How dare you? Do you know who I am?" The golden-armored general sneered and said, "Isn't it just the young master of the union of 10,000 immortals? Don't you know that 30% of the wanted documents issued by Deyu over the years are related to your union of 10,000 immortals? I was worried that I couldn't find the high-level members of your union of 10,000 immortals, and now you've come to me. Ha!" With a loud roar, the tens of thousands of Deyu soldiers who had rushed to the registration office from all directions and surrounded it burst into furious roars at the same time. Blades and spears stood as tall as trees in a forest, and their breaths rumbled like thunder. Hundreds of oracles were hovering above a killing formation that looked like a crab, constantly crushing bone talismans to enchant the soldiers with various defensive talismans. Under the control of hundreds of soldiers, dozens of giant crossbows had been drawn, and magic-breaking arrows, each as thick as an arm and more than 10 feet long and made of special alloys, were ready to be fired. The arrows had locked onto Li Qinghua and the immortals of Myriad Immortal Alliance, and the murderous intent emanating from them made the weakest immortals shudder. Instinctively, they sensed that death was right in front of them. An army of 10,000 soldiers was more than enough to trap and kill lower-grade gold immortals. Among the heaven immortals around Li Qinghua, the strongest was only a 17th-tier heaven immortal. How could they have the courage to fight against the army of 10,000 soldiers from Diyu dynasty? A few old immortals who followed closely behind Li Qinghua cried out in a low voice, "Young lord, leave now." Li Qinghua was taken aback. He gave a deep look at the heavily armored general in front of him, then suddenly sneered and said, "Good. You are as brave as ants. I'll remember you. Don't let me run into you in the future." With a strange laugh, a green shuttle-shaped immortal artifact suddenly shot out of the top of Li Qinghua's head. With a sway of the wind, it transformed into a flying ship that was more than 100 feet long. Li Qinghua and the dozens of immortals around him were sucked into the ship. A beam of green light shot out of the ship and vanished in the blink of an eye. How could the generals of Diyu allow Li Qinghua to escape so easily? Dozens of dragon-shaped flying ships flew out of the immortal pass set up by Diyu officials on the east side, and the soldiers were about to board the ships to chase after Li Qinghua and his companions. But, the immortal officials sent by the celestial court suddenly descended from Chi-Chi, and a few of them stopped the golden-armored general. A faint fluctuation of immortal energy locked down the surrounding void, causing the movements of the human soldiers to come to an abrupt halt. They were flying at the speed of a snail, so there was no way they could board the flying ships. With the interference of these immortal officials, it was impossible for the soldiers of Diyu's immortal pass to chase after Li Qinghua and his companions. The golden-armored general flew into a rage. He pointed a finger at the immortal officials and snapped, "What are you doing? How dare you? The alliance of myriad immortals is wanted by the officials of Diyu." The immortal officials just grinned at the generals of Diyu with insincere smiles. They did not explain, but they also did not let the soldiers of Diyu board the flying ships to chase after Li Qinghua. They were clearly trying to stir up trouble. Although the golden-armored general was furious, he could not do anything to them. Each of the giant teleportation formations on Panga continent was extremely important, so the Celestial Court and the officials of Diyu had sent appropriate personnel to guard them. The so-called appropriate personnel meant that both sides were of equal strength, and once a conflict broke out, it would result in a lose-lose situation. The immortals here and Diyu's army were evenly matched, and if the immortals deliberately obstructed the movement of Diyu's army would not be able to move. Just as the two sides were confronting each other, the five-colored divine ray that Princess Zhanglu had transformed into had already teleported hundreds of millions of miles away. The blue shuttle-shaped flying ship used by Li Qinghua was a rare artifact. It was made by his father, the sovereign of Myriad Immortal Alliance, with the body of a blue one that could fly at an incredible speed and some rare materials. The item spirit of the flying ship was the soul of that blue one. The speed of the flying ship was more than 100 times faster than the teleportation of ordinary immortals, and it was a life-saving treasure that Li Qinghua used to save his life. Princess Zhongli's five-colored divine ray was extremely magical, and she could travel hundreds of millions of miles in just a blink of an eye. But, Li Qinghua was driving the flying ship at a much faster speed. Moreover, Princess Zhongli had to protect Catfish and the others with her own magic power, while there were dozens of immortals in Li Qinghua's flying ship, who could take turns to inject magic power into the ship to drive it forward. As a result, in just 6 hours, Li Qinghua's flying ship was less than 100 miles behind Princess Zhonglu. Princess Zhonglu frowned as she stared at the green beam that was chasing after her from a distance. The natural energy was constantly pouring into her body to replenish the magic power she had consumed in her rapid escape. But, after all, her strength was limited, and Princess Zhongli's cultivation base was not as strong as that of the few old immortals around Li Qinghua. As a result, Princess Zhongli's speed was getting slower and slower, while the flying ship was getting faster and faster. A cold gleam flashed in Princess Zhongli's eyes as she waved her hand casually. Suddenly, a dark cloud, about 100 miles in circumference, appeared out of nowhere in the void behind her. Lightning flashed vaguely, and the rumbling of thunder shook the earth. Dozens of mountains on the ground were on the verge of collapse, and some huge rocks were even thrown up into the air like a retrograde meteor shower. The flying ship plunged headlong into the area covered by the dark cloud. With a thought, Princess Zhanglu recited a few incantations, and the dark cloud suddenly turned into a flaming cloud. Like a broken dam, the crimson heavenly flame poured down from the sky like a boundless sea of fire. Countless red lightning bolts that were as thick as water tanks came crashing down from the sea of flames. They struck the flying boat heavily as if they were living creatures with intelligence. The dark cloud rolled and enveloped the flying ship. The temperature of the heavenly flame was extremely high, and the dozens of mountains on the ground had been gradually melted by the heat, with a large amount of lava flowing down them. All the rivers and lakes had dried up, and the area within 100 miles had turned into a lava hell. The temperature around the flying ship was rising rapidly, and the originally green flying ship was now glowing with a faint red light. The thunderbolts slammed into the flying ship, producing a deafening explosion that cracked the ground. Every thunderbolt shattered the flying ship, causing it to sway in midair. Loud cries of alarm could be heard coming from inside the ship. Li Qinghua and the others had never dreamed that Princess Zhanglu could have such a mysterious divine ability or magic. The immortals in the flying ship were shocked to find that when the flying ship broke into the flaming cloud, they had lost contact with the natural energy of the outside world, and it was much more difficult for them to fight back with immortal magic. Princess Zhongli's innate divine ability, the five-colored divine light, had imprisoned the natural energy in that space, depriving the immortals in the flying ship of their ability to use the energy. If it were an ordinary cultivator, they would not be able to cast any magic in the area covered by the flaming cloud. But, Li Qinghua had a few veteran heaven immortals with him, and they had accumulated an astonishing amount of immortal energy in their bodies. Unable to mobilize the natural energy of the outside world, these heaven immortals could only use the immortal energy in their bodies and cast powerful immortal magic. A beam of white light shot out of the flying ship, and amidst it, an ancient-looking axe condensed purely from immortal energy gradually emerged. Gradually, fist-sized, colorful thunderbolts began to emerge around the axe. When the number of these tiny thunderbolts reached 360, a light cry was heard coming from the flying ship. Abruptly, the axe thrust towards Princess Zhongli's back, leaving behind a bright gleam. Accompanied by ear-splitting whistling noises, the 360 thunderbolts smashed down towards Princess Zhonglu and her company like raindrops. With a backhand gesture, Princess Zhonglu thrust her palm out and cried out fiercely, "Break!" As her cry rang out, a space about 10 feet in circumference behind her suddenly collapsed and shattered, sending countless dark fragments scattering in all directions. The axe flew right into the shattered space and disappeared without a trace. The collapsed space healed in an instant, and the 360 thunderbolts slammed violently into the five-colored divine light that protected Princess Zhonglu. The sound of explosions kept ringing out, and each time a thunderbolt exploded, it made Princess Zhongli's divine light tremble. Every time a thunderbolt exploded, it threw Princess Zhonglu and her company hundreds of miles away. By the time the 360 thunderbolts exploded one after another, Princess Zhongli's protective divine light had become fragmented and was about to disappear completely. Blood trickled down from the corner of Princess Zhongli's mouth, and her body was limp. She no longer had the strength to flee. The flying ship sped over and was about to block the path of Princess Zhonglu and her company. At that very moment, Gold Horn and Silver Horn roared furiously at the same time. Their bodies expanded abruptly and transformed into two dragon pythons of fire and ice, each measuring 3,000 feet long. Goldhorn grabbed everyone in his hand and flew away at top speed, while Silverhorn hovered behind him, deterring the flying ship from a distance. The brothers transformed into two beams of light, spread their fleshy wings, and abruptly turned into two beams of cold light that pierced through the clouds and flew thousands of miles away in just a blink of an eye. A furious roar came from the flying ship behind them as it turned into a beam of green light again and chased after Goldhorn and Silverhorn. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.